All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Harry with Church of the Eternal Logos, and I am joined by my good friend and the most frequently returning guest to this program, Dr. Michael Moeller. How are you, sir?
Hey, pleasure as always, Patrick, to be here. Can't really complain. Again, Southern California, 70 and sunny today, so
There you go.
No complaints on my end, that's for sure.
That's right. And it looks like that beard's coming in nice and thick. That's a little attribute. Is this part of the No Shave November? Obviously, we're getting into No Nut November, so I see you've gone from the stubble to a full-blown ortho beard.
Hey, I feel like I'm trying to fit in around here. Yeah, dude, you sit and stare at icons enough, you're kind of like,
Yeah.
If I'm wanting to get up on that wall someday, Lord have mercy on me. I don't know. Did they let people on that wall without a beard?
Not very many. No, I don't see many of the men on any of those icons without some facial hair. That's for sure. And then that's the effect of the Eucharist, right? You commune with Christ, all of a sudden you grow chest hair and a beard.
That's what's happening, bro.
It's theology. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Anyways,
we're trying to get ready for cold winters too.
Go ahead.
So I'm trying to get ready for colder winters too. Hopefully, to move out of SoCal.
It's the face coat. It keeps you nice and warm. So what we're going to be diving into is a topic that we've kind of gone back and forth with privately, probably over the last year and a half, couple years, just talking about. We've done videos on here talking about testosterone, optimization for men's health, fitness, stuff like that. But we haven't really just dove in deeply on this particular topic. And the topic is semen retention. And there is a huge convoluted litany of articles, medical research, medical advice, telling us that if you retain your semen, if you don't masturbate, you don't watch porn, you're probably going to have prostate cancer, which is the leading killer of men, right? And so for a regular person who doesn't have a medical background, if they were to dive into this topic, they would be inundated with a lot of official sources telling them that it is bad to retain one's semen. However, when you look in the history of spirituality, almost all spiritual traditions have some sort of teaching that men who maintain their semen maintain their spiritual strength, their physical strength, and a sort of mental clarity and strength. And so that's what we're going to be diving into today. Now, you have a PowerPoint we're eventually going to get into covering everything regarding semen retention, but maybe we can just open it up here in regards to the popularity of this topic within culture, generally speaking. It seems like everybody's interested in semen retention right now.
Yeah, I mean, I actually really like this idea of, No Nut November or, your breast cancer awareness. We do certain things to, at the end of the day, just let people know kind of what's going on, right? And I think you and I, growing up in a very secular world, having a very secular education, right? You remove God from the science, right? In my opinion, orthodoxy, our whole point is to find the truth,
right?
And you can argue that the scientific venture is for truth too. And, one of the main things I think we'll probably get into tonight is we can talk about science. I got research papers, but you and I know this really coming into orthodoxy, how our whole worldviews really shift.
Yeah.
Right. And I like I said, we should call in Father Deacon and Ananias because I was talking to him probably 2 weeks ago about who's watching the scientists, right? The philosophy of science, like you talk about Neil deGrasse Tyson and all these, climate change.
Yep.
And science can tell you what the world is, but it can't tell you what to do, and it can't give you morality.
Right.
So you read this paper and go, oh, wow, it looks like guys who ejaculate more have a decreased chance for prostate cancer. Okay, how do we extrapolate that data? Right. Oh, well, maybe we should be ejaculating more. It's like, well, if you think about it, let's say guys over 60, right, who are diabetic, they're fat, they're overweight, they have a higher incidence of having erectile dysfunction, so they are unable to ejaculate. So when we see this data, we have to decide, like, how did we get this data? How do we extrapolate and what do we do with it? And that's in all forms of science at all. And that's where, in my opinion, I try and take an orthodox worldview. And I personally believe in steel manning both sides.
Yes.
What are you come to me for, I got TRT, ED, medications, all these things. There's going to be risks and benefits to everything.
Right.
Some of my more popular recent posts, I've talked about Cialis and that's used for erectile dysfunction. But a lot of people don't know, like, its mechanism of action was for heart disease, and it's used to increase blood flow.
Right. I know bodybuilders that use it because of the ability to get much larger pumps because of the increase in blood flow.
Yeah, and then we can get into this idea of like, well, what's natural and what's not natural. I mean, I'm at the point now where I'll tell most guys when they come to me, you're on hormone replacement therapy whether you know it or not, right? You want to talk about atrazine, birth control in the water, BPA, all these xenoestrogens, they're everywhere. So you come to me, you're like, well, I want to stay natural. I'm like, sorry, if even you could make an argument for caffeine. You're inhibiting this adenosine receptor and you're forcing your body to release epinephrine. Really, at the end of the day. So really, it's taking this information, and as Orthodox Christians, if our goal is salvation, how does this play into that, right? So if like, okay, cool, maybe you decrease your chances for prostate cancer, but you increase your chances for erectile dysfunction and to have a terrible marriage. You can't, you know what I'm saying? There's no, you have to take these things all into consideration at the end of the day. And the thing that I get so frustrated about, we talked, is just the media coming out and saying, this is dangerous. Oh my gosh. It's like, yeah, 1 month of semen retention.
That's what's so interesting about this topic. Just me doing a cursory search in preparation for today's stream. I know you have a lot deeper analysis, but it seems like every institution that, if you have eyes to see, might be against your well-being is telling you to masturbate. It's telling you to watch porn. It's telling you the necessity for ejaculation or you're going to get prostate cancer. And I can't imagine that all these major institutions have my best interest at hand. And so I find that so interesting, where the historical, and that's where, you know, as you move through this sort of truth process, these rabbit holes, you know, we find that a lot of our ancestors weren't as ignorant as we may have perceived them to be. And so, you know, the idea of semen retention for men, men's strength, men's mental clarity, men's spiritual strength is, it doesn't matter if you're pagan, doesn't matter if you're Buddhist, doesn't matter if you're Taoist, doesn't matter if you're Christian. It's within all these different traditions. And even if you watch The Northman, you know, that very popular pagan film, well, when the king comes home and you find out his wife was sleeping with the gentleman that instantly kills him, well, she wants to sleep with the king, and he refuses because he doesn't want to be weakened, because he already knows the plot to kill him. And so he makes a point that he doesn't want to be weakened by spilling his seed by sleeping with his wife upon his arrival. And so every warrior culture, nomadic, they know that men are weakened when they spill their seed. And yet our culture is constantly telling us to do that. And of course, we know how pornography has been used as a weapon of war.
Yeah, I remember you were the one that kind of brought that up with me about two countries in the Middle East. I think you brought something up that one country basically gives the other country more porn.
Yeah. One special group of people that founded their country by the Britons bombing it into existence in 1947. They have weaponized pornography against the people, let's say, that inhabit, let's say, the Gaza Strip or something like that. And the fact that pornography is actually banned in Israel. That is really interesting, that you're not supposed to watch porn in Israel, yet porn has also been used by their military force as a weapon of war. Because why would they use that on the Palestinian men? Because it weakens them immediately. As soon as they start spilling their seed, their will to resistance, their physical strength, their spiritual fortitude, all that stuff's going to be depleted if you're taking on this sort of ancestral, archaic understanding of semen and its sort of value within man's, general health and well-being.
Yeah. And like you said, you kind of brought up the Norsemen, and then we said same thing with David, right? Yep. When he's trying to sleep, he sleeps with Bathsheba, and then he has to try and get the husband killed. And then obviously we know that was Samson, right? Delilah sleeps with him to get the secret sauce, and then it weakens him.
Yeah, exactly. And, the metaphor of men succumbing to the sexual desire is a big one. And it's a real difficult territory to navigate. And this is something that maybe Father Michael Butler could come on. I mentioned to him, me and him, we're all going to do a stream together.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool.
That would be a lot of fun. But the church is not giving great advice for young men in the 21st century. I mean, like, we understand the problems, but the weaponry of the evil one has sort of outpaced some of the perceptions of what's going on by people in clearly. Not that the teachings of the church are no longer true. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that just the understanding of what young men are up against, and the sorcery of inverting men's sexual energy as a tool to lead them astray. And so in some of the research, and I'm sure you'll probably get into this as well, is that once you start ejaculating, the desire to ejaculate increases. So once you, so say you haven't masturbated for a while, as soon as you do, it's way easier to do it again. The likelihood and the desire ramps up as soon as you do it. And so if that's the case, getting men to ejaculate regularly is going to get them to be addicted to their own sort of sexual desires, which, again, we as men are inflamed. And that's why then all these spiritual traditions, no matter what the tradition is always trying to get the man to harness that sexual energy, to bring it back and then sublimate it, filter it into positive, creative ways. And that's where all these ancient spiritual teachings talk about semen retention is essential for man's creativity and exterior things. And that's where I think, and we can get into this, for everybody who's going to take on this challenge, and we are here to promote No Nut November. Like, do not masturbate, and we can do this as a collective, as Orthodox men together, knowing that, hop in my Telegram group. If you're struggling, tell us. We'll pray for you. We are going to do this collectively as a group of men. We are not going to spill our seed for the month of November. Now, obviously, we're not supposed to spill our seed ever, but we know how life really is, right? Yep. I mean, all of us are doing it one way. Yeah, go ahead. I've been rambling.
Oh no, I was just saying, right? You and I don't want to come here to be a hypocrite. Really, at the end of the day, like, I'm a sinner. I've one of the things we talked about is like, I wish someone in my teens would have told me these things. Like, look, dude, if you start masturbating and then you get a girl, it's like you're totally wiring your brain in the wrong direction. Yeah. One of the things I tell my guys, it's kind of like a free throw. You ever watch any sports, you always have, like, you're a baseball pitcher, you're a baseball batter, there is a neural circuit, right? So your neurons that fire together, wire together, right? So how many guys, like, you pick up a phone, it already, like, oh, am I going to masturbate? Am I going to look at some porn? Am I going to see, like, you're already starting to wire these things. So, you shoot your basketball free throw a certain way, and then, like, you're used to sitting in a chair hunched over watching a screen, right? So now all of a sudden you have a girlfriend, should be your wife, right? You have your wife now, and you've been doing it this way for a long period of time. It's like, obviously, it's a whole new ballgame, and you've wired your brain in the wrong direction. So it's like an addiction. It's like anything else. You're going to have a hard time breaking that. Yeah. And, anecdotally, I've seen that. I've had guys. So my first job out of school, I was working at an ED center. I saw hundreds of guys. I mean, you can't even believe, like, guys that would, and again, I don't have to get into too much of the bushes about, like, they were swinging. Oh, hey, it works with my girlfriend, but it doesn't work with my wife. And I'm like, well, it's probably your issue. That's probably your issue.
Your issue. Yeah.
And again, I'm not here, at the end of the day, Christ is the ultimate healer. And the way I view what I do in this world, and I think most medical professionals, is Satan has used certain things against us, right? When you want to talk about hormone replacement therapy, like, right, I look in the world and I see the devil's using hormone replacement therapy against us, right? So you want to look at sperm counts. Sperm counts are down about 70% in the last 50 years. We'll get over that.
Right.
So am I not supposed to use a pharmaceutical to help someone with fertility? Like, that's the way I view it. I'm like, at the end of the day, it's Christ and his methodology, right? And it's coming to Christ and it's searching for the truth and being a disciple of Christ that will ultimately heal you. Right. The wages of sin are death. All these things that we've done to each other, right? Like, you break your arm, I'm not going to pray to God. Like, you need to go to the ER. Like, God gave us logic,
you gotta
right?
get that thing set.
And so when we get into the science and this methodology, like when you want to talk about, again, antibiotics, hormone replacement therapy, stem cells, supplements, all these different things, I just try to do my best when I talk to any patient is like, here are your options, right? My job in the medical professional is to go and view the research. I'm here to help you, but I believe as doctor's teacher. That's literally the Greek, right? Docere.
Right.
I don't know everything, right? And I'm not here to preach and tell everyone that I know everything. You brought up stuff like I didn't know about semen volume per blood. I don't know everything.
Right.
And I'm not here to act like I do, but I'm here with you and me to try and search for truth and hopefully enlighten people and keep them away from suffering. Yes. Like, this is my main thing, is like, I went through this. I've had problems in my relationships because of these issues.
Right.
And I know there's 15 to 16-year-old guys right now that are going to go down this path and everyone's telling them it's good to masturbate. And then they see an article saying, oh, No Nut November is dangerous.
Yeah.
These are just
well, you can speak to that. I mean, there was a video that you sent me by a very prominent female urologist on YouTube, has gets considerable views for her videos, has a following, and uses her title as a urologist and an MD to continually tell men to masturbate. Porn's okay. Talking about, everything is basically promoting self-pleasure in some way or another, or having multiple pleasures with other people. And this is now being brought as science.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. They use that worldview to justify, and I don't know where her morality is. Like, obviously, I don't know her as an individual. And these people that write these, I can only extrapolate what they're telling us to do, right? Judge them by their future. Like, what you're telling me to jump off a cliff? It's like, you probably don't have my best interest in mind, right? And I have to step back and I have to humble myself and like, what's the orthodox worldview, right? My spiritual father says, Michael, no sex with anyone, including yourself, until you're married. All right, Father, I'm going to do my best. Pray for me. I've messed up, Right. But like anything, like you want to lose weight, you got to go to the gym, and you probably won't, right? And that's the other thing is like, when you want to make lifestyle changes, right? You're familiar with this. Is like these rituals all embed themselves in your circadian rhythm, and they embed them with your dopamine, your serotonin, right? Like your brain, right? If you work out at the same time every day, your blood sugar will slowly increase because it knows, right? Your cortisol spikes every morning to increase your blood sugar when you wake up. So if you're used to doing things, and that's one of the biggest issues with breaking an addiction, like with alcoholics, is like you got to get them away from those friends, and you have to get them out of that rhythm. Yeah. So if you want to make a lifestyle change, one of the biggest things you do is switch your schedule up and move. Right. So, and people will mess up, pray for mercy for God, for your own forgiveness, repent, say that it was wrong, and start over. Like you're saying, it's easy once you break it, right? You just tumble and keep going down the rabbit hole in the wrong direction.
Yeah. No, and we have to sublimate some of that physical energy. So I think for everybody who's going to take on with us No Nut November, and obviously we're not advocating to, spill your seed on December 1st, but the thing is we're going to do this collectively, solidarily together. That a group of Orthodox men, you can reach out to me or Dr. Mo. We are going to do this together and hold each other accountable for a month in which we are trying to bring awareness to this fact that, hey, guys, get your stuff together. Get in control of yourselves, especially your sexual energies, and then sublimate that energy to create. And I think, and this goes back to my conversation with Father Michael Butler, shout out to him in the live chat, is, think about getting your physical fitness together. Like after a week or so of not spilling your seed, maybe 2 weeks, you're going to experience an increase in energy. Do something with it, productive. Create that new feedback where you're taking that sort of somatic bodily energy where you want to basically pleasure yourself and turn that back onto you in regards to physical exercise. And create that new feedback loop, that new Pavlovian response and sympathetic connections where, now you get a sense of like physical pleasure from growing and working on yourself and your body. Because I think for me personally, I know that if I don't do something physical, especially let's say for this month, not masturbating, not spilling your seed for the entire month, it's going to be way more difficult if I'm just doing cerebral things all the time, because it's a cerebral activity that wants to get you into the masturbation itself. Because by watching pornography, by doing various forms of masturbation, it is a bodiless form of sexual activity. And that's really what the internet is itself, is it's getting us to sort of move into a world in which we're really just minds. And that's what the metaverse is, doing away with the body and you're just your mind. And so if you then are scrolling social media, doing one thing or another, and then you get that, you see that girl's butt, you see that her perfect figure, you see, how great she looks. And then that leads to a thought, and now you're having physical reactions, you're getting an erection, you're thinking, dang, man, I need to do something. That the masturbating and then watching pornography, what that's doing is it's having a sort of sexual experience that's totally disembodied. And you need to then make sure that you're being embodied by taking that sexual energy and then focusing it back on yourself. I think this would be a great time if you've been wanting to make that change in your life, make that transition. Do that with us this month. Start going to the gym this month. Stop spilling your seed this month. And who knows what next month's going to be, but take it a day at a time. And you're going to be there with other brothers. We're all doing this together.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I gotta be a little bit careful. I can't be like medical advice, stop spilling your seed, blah, blah, blah. I'm in on this. Like, I think that, and this is where you like from a scientific worldview versus an anecdotal worldview. I hear this from guys all the time that I work with. And it's funny because I have some guys come to me when we're talking about testosterone. They'll be like, yeah, I've tried semen retention and I just felt better. I'm like, to me, that's good. Like, I honestly, I go for wins. Like, I'm very scientifically based, but at the end of the day, anecdotally, if you come to me with a symptom, my job is to help you get rid of that symptom. And it's funny because the scientific community would be like, well, there's no double-blind placebo-controlled trial over the last 40 years showing that semen retention is able to increase your energy levels via MRI brain scans. I'm like, yeah, there's no research on statins or high blood pressure or the mixture of these different medications together either.
Right.
So they straw man all sides all the time. And I heard Father Deacon say this in IS, but I'd assume that he got it from a church father about, right? These negative thoughts are like birds on a bird's nest in your head. And so like you're saying is, I think the sexual sin is one of the only things the Bible says you flee from it. Right. Right.
And
like
it's one
you
got to
get away.
Sins where it's damaging your own body. Most sins are you doing something else. This one specifically harming your own body.
Yeah, and there are people out there who know scripture better than me. Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's a verse. Sexual sin though is like flee, right? You can resist the devil. Like, no, you get sexual sin. You see that picture, get away, throw your phone out, go for a walk, like do something, get the heck away from it. The more you sit, the more those birds start nesting on your head, and then the more they're able to enroot. And that's really at the end of the day when all lifestyle changes are, like we said, they're dopamine kicks, they're dopamine cycles. Testosterone is the hormone that makes things good, and right. That's why we'll get into some of the studies. I think there's a decent amount of evidence. There's really only 2 studies with testosterone, which we'll get into. But they do show minor increases in testosterone. And it's like, you don't have to be a genius to figure this stuff out.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, oh, wow, he's not, masturbating 3 times a day. So he's going to the gym or he's focused on other things. And again, so I'm not trying to straw man anything. I was trying to steel man both sides of the argument.
Right, and that's what we want to do. We're not trying to straw man anything. I try to do the same thing in my streams. When we want to steel man the other person's argument. And so before we dive into it, there's arguments. There's a video with Jesse James West, a very popular fitness guy on YouTube. And I think his channel's like over 1 million subs or whatnot. But he did a no nut for a month, didn't ejaculate, got his test levels done the beginning of the month, and then got them done at the very end of the month. And he went up like over 100 free testosterone within his body. The female doctor who was taking his blood, just as we said, told him the exact opposite would happen. She told him that he shouldn't be doing this, that it's bad for him to not ejaculate, that he's probably going to lose testosterone. And so then he did it just for a video, and then it ended up doing the exact opposite. And the doctor, oh my gosh, I don't know. Wow, that just seems like contrary to everything I know. And it's like, no, that's exactly why warriors don't spill their seed before they go to battle.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And I mean, really at the end of the day, the problem, real quick, right? Yep. The reason the MDs have the driver's seat is Rockefeller, Carnegie. Yep. This is called the Flexner Report. They went around the United States and looked for who was giving medications. They saw the naturopathic doctors, the osteopathic doctors, the chiros weren't doing it. And then they discredited all those universities. And then they made you have to have a license to practice medicine. And then they funded all the research. So, doctors, and I have a lot of good MD friends, MP friends, DO friends. And the philosophy that's entrenched in them when they go to school is, oh, you have this issue, here's this pill. Like that's on, what I'm saying? Like it isn't, let me understand the biochemistry of like, why would your testosterone be low? When you want to think about statins, a lot of arguments about statins and testosterone. What does a statin do? It shuts down the enzyme that turns cholesterol into testosterone.
Right.
I mean, I would think that probably taking that would lower your testosterone, lower your cortisol. Like that's the mechanism of action, right? So when I come at these things, I look at them more mechanism of action, more biology, more anatomy. Like how do these things piece together? And then I try and be a detective, really, at the end of the day. So when you say, hey, Dr. Mo, well, semen retention, is that going to boost my testosterone? I'm like, well, let's kind of think about that. And again, at the end of the day, like doing a lot of hormone stuff, I think the medical community got something like completely wrong, like estrogen. Like when we think about hormone replacement therapy, a lot of it, people think bodybuilders, testosterone, a lot of them use what's called a aromatase inhibitor to lower their estrogen. Well, when you're on a bodybuilder and you're doing a ton of testosterone, like 1,000 milligrams a week, your estrogen is going to go too high and you're going to have a bad ratio.
Right.
So they take an anastrozole to bring it down. Well, then they thought, let's just get rid of all the estrogen. Then we found out if your estrogen goes too low, it affects your sex drive and libido.
Right.
So it's not just like, you can't just view things in a vacuum at the end of the day.
Right.
You have to take all these different things into consideration. And really at the end of the day, what is your morality? What is your ethics, right? You and I want to get to heaven.
I want to get to heaven too.
Right. I'm trying to become, and like, it's hard. I'm a sinful man. I have a dirty noose. I'm trying to figure this out like everyone else.
Yeah. And so, for people listening, it's not like me and Dr. Mo haven't masturbated or watched porn in 2 years. No, we struggle with all this stuff too. We're consciously working on this, and let's get into the PowerPoint here in just a second. But you know, this is why before I get married, before I get with the woman that I'm going to spend my life with, I want to make sure that I have all this stuff under control. That way, when I get into a relationship, it is, I am the man that I really do want to become and want to be. And so this is something that all of us can work on. You know, we don't want to take these sex addictions or porn addictions or whatever type of self-pleasure addiction you have into a quote-unquote orthodox relationship. And the same thing with the women, because that's the other thing to this side is, it's not like women don't watch porn and masturbate too. I know for a fact, I know Orthodox women that's one of the things that they struggled with coming to the church is pornography. So this is not just a man's problem, but that's what we're going to be focusing on, because we're interested in semen retention and how it's going to relate to testosterone. So if you want, go ahead and open up that PowerPoint, and I'm going to I'll alter our.
We'll see how this goes. I'm going to be kind of sliding back and forth.
Okay.
Let's see. So I go to share screen. Mm-hmm. People won't see our beautiful. Can they still see our beautiful faces when we do this?
To the side, yes. And so I'm going to. I'm going to change the, there we go.
Kind of the view or whatever. Because I can't, at this point, then I can't see anything. I have this on my screen and I can't see live chat or anything. So if people.
If you hit exit, it should be able to maintain the share screen, and you'll be able to see other windows on your keyboard, like escape on your keyboard. Yeah, okay, but then, never mind. Go back. Yeah, you're going to have to deal with it because it's, okay. So go ahead and do the first slide and lead us through here.
And just, again, I'm not here to shill anything. I'm just trying to give it. And this is the same thing I do with medications. Like, I have a whole PowerPoint on Cialis. Guys come to me like, well, I don't need that. That's a medication. I'm like, look, let's look at the benefits. Let's look at the same thing with testosterone replacement, NAD, peptides. I give you the facts. I believe it's your body. Like, this is me and Patrick coming here and saying, look, this is what I see. And we'll definitely tear into some of these topics. So,
yeah.
You know, this is just some brief overview of things that we already mentioned. Like, what is No Net November? Is eventually just some guys coming together saying, hey, let's not spill our seeds.
Yeah.
Right. And that should be even massive. Like, this isn't edging too. We'll get into that. But just in the spirit of motivation, one of my favorite quotes is by St. Augustine about a man has as many masters as he does vices. Mm-hmm. Right. And so the Orthodox ethos at the end of the day is purifying ourselves. Right. Yes. You know, we can talk about Tate converting to Islam. Just this idea, and people still struggle with this. Like, God is almighty and powerful because he depends on nothing. He doesn't need me. He doesn't need you. He needs nothing. And he's so pure. So our job, right, is to purify ourselves to be like Christ. And then nothing controls us, right? No man fear death. No, I don't have to masturbate. I don't have to. I don't have to eat. I don't have to do other things. That's why we fast.
Right.
So, and then I put in the John 8:36, who the Son sets free is free indeed, right? It's through Christ is really the only way we ever get there. So again, as a doctor, I'm not here to say, oh, all you gotta do is take this pill to get better. It's like, no, you need to change your lifestyle. You need to change your mindset. Really, at the end of the day, you need to change your relationship with Christ.
Right. And as Orthodox Christians, I think it makes sense. It makes sense why we would want to let the body sort of go back to its natural processes. So not masturbate, not spilling your seed for a month, getting back into a healthy diet, working out. Just take note of how you feel today, November 1st, and how you feel at the end of the month. Maybe you don't but let's, document the transition of your body. And I think that as you let these processes sort of get back to baseline, instead of we're constantly altering them by ejaculating or whatever things we put inside of our body, that this is it's getting back to the sort of the way that the body's supposed to work, that God intended it, and why he's telling us. I looked up in the Bible before this stream, like where it mentions semen. Of course, it's all like Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Genesis, but it talks literally about how a man can be unclean by spilling his seed when it's not necessary. And so, that's exactly true for us.
Yeah, for sure. And then, again, all this goes together. That's why I threw in the Proverbs 24:16, fall down, get back up again, right? We're all going to be sinners. None of us are perfect. We're going to continue. You'll probably mess this up. And then I did a couple of the Matthew quotes about, the light, the eye is the seat of the soul, right? So if you're looking at porn and whether or not it's your internal eye or your eye of your body, like what are you consuming, right? That's darkening your news at the end of the day. And then again, you get in these arguments, well, if I don't masturbate, then what happens when I actually have sex and I can't get it up and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. Right. At the end of the day, it's like, if your dick's going to cause you salvation, I'm going to be a little extreme, but that's what the Bible says. At the end of the day, it's like, we need to overcome our worldly passions, and you're supposed to do whatever it takes.
Right.
Right. And then I also really like 1 Peter 5. And again, I'm not clergy. There are plenty of other people that could talk about this way better than me, but I thought it'd be cool to throw some of these Bible verses up here. Right. Wages of sin is death. Be sober and be vigilant.
Right.
And then, so I just threw up some other notes about, I think the science is very muddy on this topic, right? And the issue with almost all science is who's funding the study and why are they funding it, right? I use an example of, I had a roommate in college who was getting his PhD paid by a chemical company, and he was proving that their chemicals work well, right? Same thing, I can drop some big pharmaceutical company, and they're the one paying for the research to be done. So obviously, if the research doesn't go in the direction they want, are they going to get more funding? And then at the end of the day, when you look at results and conclusions, I've seen people extrapolate data. I'm like, I just read that study, and that is not what I read. Like, there's a really bad study about testosterone replacement and heart disease for older men in the VA. And they gave them like a cream, and their testosterone levels, even on the testosterone, they didn't get them in a normal range. And they're like, yeah, these guys died. I'm like, well, what's the point of the study? The point of the study is to get their range,
Right.
So, and that's where, again, I we can kind of just bring up a couple different things too. Most of the studies that I found are mostly on orgasm and sex. And so people extrapolate that and say, orgasm, masturbating is good because it helps you release oxytocin, and therefore you'll sleep better at night. I'm like, there's no study for that. There's a study for sex before bed, and it helped them sleep.
Right.
But there are some, but I'm just giving you some.
And a point that we're making is sex with a partner. If you guys are married, that is very different than what we're talking about in regards to watching porn or masturbating as a single man. Our general angle now, if you're married and you want to participate in No Nut November with a single man, you're absolutely, that's great too. At the same time, you need to consult your partner, because as Scripture says, I believe this, I forget where Paul says this in the epistles, but once you're married, your body is your wife's body and her body is your body. So you abstaining, you need to clarify that with her, because technically your body isn't yours once you're married. There's a different relationship there. So we're not telling people to not engage in romance with a married partner. We're talking about self-pleasure and pornography specifically. Now, obviously, retaining your semen is going to help your testosterone no matter if you're married or not.
Yep. And that's, again, where we'll get into, I think I can pull this article. I think I'm still screen sharing, but I'd like to pull up.
Yeah, do it. And you can post anything in the live chat.
So sorry, watch your eyes, boys. But what I want to bring up is just these articles, right, where they say hormone and chemical release. And it's like, researcher shows masturbations and sex, blah, blah, blah. And they list all these things.
Yeah.
I did a video on this today, and it's just the way they think, right? Like, one of the big ones was, there's a study down here where they're like, increasing levels of hormones are involved, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, this is just like Ritalin. And I'm like, yeah, Ritalin, like the ADHD drug that it literally shrinks your brain. The studies have shown long-term use of Ritalin shrinks your brain. But you get where they're correlating. Well, we know that orgasm through masturbation increases dopamine. That's just like Ritalin. Well, yeah, that's just like cocaine. And that's just like, and again, this is where there's a spectrum of all these things. Caffeine kind of works like, and again, it's a big extrapolation. I'm not telling you can't take caffeine. But caffeine releases dopamine. It blocks the adenosine receptor in your brain. Caffeine is actually a natural herbicide. Plants use that to kill you. This is Paul Saladino. Right. And when humans take it in a low dose, it helps us produce more neurotransmitters. Specifically, it puts us in the fight or flight response, and then your brain works better. So we have to take all those things in consideration. So I just
Right.
want to share that article that's the kind of way that they extrapolate the data.
Right.
You're like, well, this is just like that. I'm like, that's not science. I don't know what that is. And then again, I think you really have to take into consideration. We talked about prostate cancer, right? You could tell a young man, well, you need to be ejaculating 5 times a week to avoid prostate cancer. I'm like, okay, so if you ejaculate 5 times a week and you don't get married till you're 35, I would argue you probably have higher chances of having erectile dysfunction and probably have a harder time in your marriage.
Right.
Because you're going to masturbate 5 times a week for 15, 20 years, and then you're going to get married and just stop.
Yeah, stop doing that and then engage in a different type of pleasure. That's where, like, the oxytocin and stuff, I think it's just different when it's within actual sex. Like, women release oxytocin as bonding mechanisms with the partner that they're with. If you're releasing oxytocin and it's your hand looking at random strangers having sex on your computer screen, what type of bonding mechanism are you establishing?
Yeah, you're bonding with your computer. And we'll probably talk about almost everything before we get there. But there is a study, and it showed that the prolactin release when you have sex with a partner is 400% higher than when you do it through masturbation. And this is what I'm trying to show is like these hormones are not released equally. But then you can also, again, I'll steel man both sides. Prolactin technically with dopamine at high amounts can inhibit what's called gonadotropin releasing hormone.
Okay.
And that can lower your testosterone. But the devil's in the details of what that looks like, how often you're doing it. And I would argue that there's probably ratios of oxytocin that's offsetting that. We don't really know.
Okay.
That's the thing is like, we'll say, well, we know prolactin inhibits gonadotropin releasing hormone. True. But we also don't know what these like is oxytocin inhibiting its ability, and we don't have studies that show if you like high amounts of prolactin. So, for instance, a guy can have what's called a pituitary adenoma, where he produces high amount of prolactin.
Okay.
And this is a cause. I always measure this in guys. This can lower your testosterone. It's a weird thing that happens in maybe 5 to 10% of guys. So, if you're interested in getting your hormones measured and you're a guy, measure your prolactin.
Okay.
But high amounts of prolactin. Again, think about it after orgasm. You're just in this like fluffy state, right? You're not in this dry. You're like that situation, like you're saying, that prolactin oxytocin is meant to be released so you can bond with your partner, right? So there's a natural mechanism, and I would argue, like anything, that there are steps and it has downstream effects that we don't understand,
right?
Because we talk about this a lot of times. Like for instance, the drug Cialis, it inhibits an enzyme called phosphodiesterase. And nitric oxide in the blood is what goes inside the cell to give the reaction. And Cialis blocks the breakdown of that cascade. And so you can say, well, technically, no, nitric oxide does not decrease intracellular calcium, which leads to vasodilation. But it's cyclic guanylase and then a protein kinase and then something else. And then that. Does that make sense?
Right.
So there's downstream effects that we can't extrapolate data on.
Right.
And so you have to use your common sense. At the end of the day, that's all we have. So, and then I made a little Jordan Peterson. Like I said, you and I commented on this. Is it the next one? A lot of these articles are written by, quote, shout out to you and Rachel's stream last night, which is in postmodern neo-Marxists in the science. The science is really bad in this area. And you have all these sex therapists and sex psychologists who have which
are majority women.
Yes.
Why are all these women telling men about their testosterone and their semen? Where's all the men to try to tell us what to do? Like the people that are actually doing it and talking about their own experiences. Just my cursory search, it had to be at least 80%. And then the black men were the only ones that were actually doing it and promoting it. Like if you get on black YouTube, it's very common for a lot of the black men that are into fitness and stuff, African-American men, saying, hey, I retain my semen. This is what I do. I'm a big advocate for it. And that works within, it's part of their own sort of spirituality. Outside of that, it's almost all female medical figures of some sort of another telling you to spill your seed or you're going to get, testy cancer.
Yeah. And I did, again, cursory search, literally just go on there and I did screenshots of that. And we'll get to that. It's all women that are writing these articles. So
which gets back to that motif again, as you point out with Rachel talking about, the whole inversion witchcraft is about a sort of, leveraging of one's sexuality. And as I talked about, Adam being the first simp, listening to Eve and not following, what he knew to be right and what God needed to do. It seems like this sort of motif is indicative. The thirst traps, now, the medical research on semen retention and so on.
Yeah. Yeah, and so and these are just kind of a little more worldly things. You know, I'd love to if you want to jump in with the different religions, but I just talked about, you know, even if you're not Orthodox, right? This is Stoicism. This is about controlling your passions, controlling your lust, having control of yourself as a man. And you know, again, at the end of the day, I've seen this induce erectile dysfunction. I have guys come to me all the time talking about, you know, masturbating several times a day. I wait for my wife to go to sleep because I can't get it up with her. That's the other thing is with porn and masturbation, like guys are able to ejaculate without getting fully hard. So what do you think is going to happen if you don't get fully hard for 5 years and you ejaculate and then you actually are trying to have sex?
Right.
Like I've seen that. Like guys are like, I can't even, like, and then they're basically, it's like a muscle. You use it or lose it. If it's not being pumped full of blood all the time, and then you have to take into consideration diabetes, heart disease. Everyone, like, I would say that most young healthy men like you and I, that's not an issue. But basically what I'm saying is these things can help prevent erectile dysfunction. It can help you break your porn habits and, you know, help save your future marriage or maybe even your marriage right now. Yeah. So, and then, yeah, if you want to speak a little bit to the ancient religion stuff that you were looking at, I mean, I'm familiar with the Taoists and, you know, Tantra talks about that. And
yeah, well, one of the things that I mentioned to Dr. Mo before going on, and that when I was just reading articles before today, one of them was about a medical article mentioning that I believe it was either 20 or 40 drops of blood are necessary for the production of 1 drop of semen. And it talked about how semen is actually one of the last fluids produced in the body. Obviously, again, if you're going to think in a biological stance, you know, reproduction, health, all this stuff's going to have to be in order before that happens. So it's one of the last fluids to be produced. And it was very interesting how they're talking about how much blood it takes to actually produce it. And this tied into this Taoist mantra, if you will, that was talking about how it's better to spill your blood than to spill your seed in regards to the strength you lose, your spiritual strength, physical strength, all this different stuff. And that was true for some of the Indian traditions and whatnot. Obviously, you can get into the Kundalini schools of spirituality and all that stuff. Now, we're not going to go down there talking about chakra systems and all that stuff. But just the idea, I was just interested in like how has semen been understood? And within the ancient world and across spiritual traditions, it was the creative fluid of man. And so, therefore, there was an immense priority on how a man then utilizes that creative fluid. And so when you're talking about the man who is ejaculating while he's mildly soft and can't even get fully hard, it's like one of the reasons why we have to stop watching porn and self-pleasuring ourselves all the time is because that self-sacrifice is going to allow us to then please and bond with somebody else better. Again, the whole point of Christianity is to, you know, love one's neighbor as oneself. I cannot do that if I'm constantly self-pleasuring because it's going to create a sort of narcissistic mentality itself. It's about continual self-pleasure, which I'm doing to myself. We have to self-sacrifice that so that we can build stronger relationships with somebody and have better sex and sexual relationships with our partner.
Yeah. And, you know, an old school, you know, microcosm, macro, like the way you do anything is how you do most things. And we see this with people not wanting to go to church, right? You're wanting, I'll just stay at home and pleasure myself. I don't want to date. I don't want to go out and find a partner. I can do everything on my own, right? Satan, you know, that's pride. You're going to fall. And like you're saying, you got to sacrifice that. And it's not always easy. You know, like, dude, being a man now is hard. We've talked to,
it's the dating now because the weak men have allowed it to get so bad. Right. Again, and it gets back to the self-pleasuring. It gets back to the pornography. I mean, look at the proliferation of these things through the 20th century, now into the 21st century. I mean, the availability of pornography has grown exponentially. I remember just when I was a kid, again, there's a video section. Only certain video stores would even have X-rated, triple X-rated stuff, you know, and you had to have ID to go in there. Now, with the internet, every child, no matter the age, has access to incredibly hardcore pornography.
Yeah, and even if it's not porn, it's just getting on Instagram. Yeah, and it doesn't have
TikTok. TikTok. Yeah. I go out of my way to not engage with all the sexual stuff, and because I'm always, it filters me the algorithm, all the fitness and like men's stuff. I will still just randomly, they'll just throw in there like some big booty girl in like a thong or shit. You know, it's like stop, like. Stop. I don't even interact with this stuff. Why are you filtering this into my feed?
Yep, because they know your demographics, and they know most men want to see that, and it's sex sells.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think another thing to elaborate on, I've been thinking about that quite a bit recently, as far as, the 1960s counterculture revolution, and then this desacralization of sex, right? So there's a couple of things going on. One, you're saying, right, like men will just masturbate, but then also, the invention of the birth control, right, allowed women to have more free sex. And then women pardon my French, they don't shit test men, right? At 16, right? The women should be closing the door. They should be closing the door and only opening it for very competent men. And that makes men more competent, right? So now we have this birth control. We don't train our daughters or men to be men. I'm not trying to blame either side, but the men aren't competent, right? And women have this idea, well, I'm going to college, I'm going to do these things, so I'll just date this boyfriend, I'll let him hit it. And then this guy who is incompetent, never done anything in his life, didn't hold the door open for the girl, starts having sex with her. And I think the stat now is like 20 to 30% of teenagers, first interaction is actually is oral sex before even kissing, right? It's like, what are we doing? Like, and do we get how that perpetuates men to not become men because they have a dopamine kick? Well, I hit this chick. I have plenty of, I'll call it some of my female colleagues. I have a lot of naturopathic doctor female colleagues who are like, where are all the men? I'm like, yeah, I dated this guy and just sits at home and smokes weed and then plays video games. And I'm like, yeah, he's probably masturbating too, and you don't know it. Right. And that's why he's like, well, why doesn't he please me? I'm like, because he's probably masturbating, because it's easier. Really. It's like it's not easier in the long run, but it's easy to sit behind a computer and just pull out some oil and be done. And then you just go online and figure what you want.
Right. Absolutely. And one of the things in regards to the competency of men is I saw an article. This was a scientific article with not biased or right-leaning or Christian, but it was talking about mate selection amongst women who are on birth control and how they actually are more attracted to more effeminate men. And they found that women that weren't on birth control, there is a major difference between the type of man they were attracted to, and that some women that at one point while on birth control, like the effeminate man, as the more women got off birth control, the more they wanted traditionally masculine men, broader shoulders, smaller waist, that typical, physique or structure. Not that they're bodybuilders, just the general traits of a high testosterone, right? And so then you think of all the women that are on birth control. Now we're getting girls on. Oh, you're 12 and you got acne. Well, we'll just put you on birth control. That's the problem. And so then they're growing up. These women don't even know what their hormones actually feel like. And they don't even allow these hormones to actually, proliferate out into the environment and match with the other hormones, of their mates. And so, of course, the women then are becoming more promiscuous. They're allowing less competent men to sleep with them, which creates this feedback loop again of the ultimate simp, because they're not focusing on their own self-improvement. They're focusing on the pleasure they can receive, one from themselves or from these women who then themselves are only looking for sexual pleasure.
Exactly. At the end of the day, then that person's they're just an object of your pleasure. Like you're saying, they're just a dopamine kick. I'm going to have sex with this person, not because I care with them, not because I want to grow in a relationship, but I get a good dopamine kick on a Friday night after a few drinks. And that goes both ways for the males and the females. And we'll get, women's hormones. Alice and I have a podcast coming out about that. Most women don't really even understand their cycles. Most men don't understand the cycle. So just real quick overview, women have you could say 3 parts of their cycle. First half is follicular phase. It's very what's called estrogen dominant. Okay. And in the first half of their cycle, women are usually powerhouse. They go out and they get things. They're excited. They want to build things. They're kind of building the mess. Estrogen increases the endometrial lining, right? That's the inner lining of the uterus. And then 14 days in, you get what's called ovulation, where the egg gets released. Mm-hmm. And then hopefully if you have sex, then the egg gets fertilized. You have ovulation. It's a 5 to 7 day window. We'll get into that. And then in the second half of the cycle, you get estrogen and progesterone going up together. Progestation, right? Think about getting ready for pregnancy. And in that half of the cycle, women are often a little more, what's the words I want to use? A little more sensitive, a little more like you're saying. So in the first half, they want a warrior. In the second half, they want a kind comparing. And I'd argue a man should be both. Right. Right. And I think, to be honest, again, pardon my French, I think the woman cycle is a shit test for guys, because women are pretty much 2 different people when they're going through their cycle. And honestly, like you're saying, because that research that you're talking about, they found out women, And dude, find a woman that was on birth control from 14 to 22 that got engaged. She gets engaged, they get married. Guess what happens?
She gets off of it and they get divorced.
Exactly. That's one of the major reasons for the divorce hike. And then these guys are heartbroken because they've just been programmed for 8 years to be this way, because women are giving positive feedback to a man that's being more kind, caring, and compassionate. And then we go after this toxic masculinity. I bet most of those women and men or whatever, people, whatever they are complaining about toxic masculinity are probably on birth control because they don't want that, right? They're like, I need a man at home that can take care of me. I don't need him out fighting wolves right now. I need him to make me a cookie and keep me warm.
Right.
So, right. And we talked about this already. Porn, we already know it's terrible.
Yep.
The dopamine kicks, the bad things, causes ED. And another thing, right? You were one of the first persons that brought the idea of porn, makes you a cuck. Can I say, I don't know, how dangerous is that word? Are we going to get censored for that?
I don't know. Well, I mean,
Brother Nathaniel,
if we say that we're in favor of cuckold pornography, I guess we wouldn't. They'd probably promote us in the algorithm.
So, again, at the end of the day, that's really what that is. And, porn, that's sex trafficking. I view it as cheating. I don't know who wouldn't, but that's something that never gets brought up and people don't really think about. And then we already talked about thirst traps. Yeah. And then I'm trying to think where I found this quote. Nothing will destroy your life faster than having everything you could ever have wanted on demand whenever you want. Yeah. Right. Testosterone and dopamine are actually more about pursuing things than getting them.
Yeah. Well, and Dr. Haberman talks a lot about that in regards to maybe we can I'll let you go. Maybe do you have a section on dopamine and
a little bit, but not as much because the issue with those things is the only thing I really want to extrapolate on is, it does release dopamine. And a lot of people say that's good. Right. And so a lot of people don't know tyrosine turns into L-dopa, dopamine, norepinephrine. So that's a whole pathway, and you have enzymes that do that. And so you can argue, masturbating, releases dopamine. Yeah, so does sex, so does cocaine. So it's like you have to take these things into consideration, and that's why, just looking at some of these articles here, I just went on. This is a quick Google search, and obviously you can tell agendas by look, Rewire News, what's at the top? Abortion. Sex, power. Come on.
There really isn't any bad news for people who like to masturbate.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And of course it's all majority women, as we were talking about.
Yeah, and I think I got one article, if I remember this guy right here, he comes from a certain background that you can probably guess.
The far right roots of no.
Yeah. Can you see that?
Oh my gosh. It's now you're a Nazi if you don't want to spill your seed.
Exactly. It's terrible. And this is just what I'm saying is if anything, I don't even have to tell you to participate, but I'm just look, you're being programmed. This is part of an agenda. And anytime there's agenda, I automatically try and go the other way.
Right. Yeah. All the right. Well, you sent me a thing on the, what was it? An admiral from the Navy telling how it's dangerous for the lower, I think, what do you call it? The lower grunts or something of the Navy. Huh? The lower, for them to not masturbate. Taking masturbation away, he thought would be terrible for some of the seamen in the Navy. And it's dude, I'm definitely not going to do that now because every institution that I don't trust is telling everybody to masturbate and spill your seed.
Exactly. And that's at the end of the day, I'm almost that way with everything now. I'm like, what are they telling me to do? All right, do the opposite.
Yeah, that's how I am too.
Yeah. So we can get real quickly in testosterone. Really, to my understanding, I kind of combed through the research, look for different articles. There's really two kind of scientific articles. They're both really, really small. They really weren't done that well. So this one, it's called Endocrine Response to Masturbation-Induced Orgasm in Healthy Men Following a 3-Week Sexual Abstinence. And again, I put the PubMed link.
That's a short window, only 3 weeks.
Yeah. And so actually what they did in this study is they had guys come in and they had them watch 20 minutes of something boring. They had them watch 20 minutes of erotic material, and then they did 20 minutes of boring stuff. And then they had them be abstinent. And then 3 weeks later, I think they even had them orgasm. And basically the only takeaway was that the guys who had abstained saw an increase in their testosterone in that 20-minute video. They didn't do any follow-up. It was just in that kind of 20-minute video where they noticed the guys who are abstaining for the 3 weeks versus guys who didn't, their testosterone went up, which again, makes sense. It's hey, I've been holding it in. I've been waiting for a time to procreate. This is it. Where if a guy just procreated yesterday, I mean, it's, again, I don't think it's like that hard to extrapolate that data and think it's weird.
And also, I mean, I'm not here to argue for Darwinian Wallace theory of evolution, but in a sort of biological evolutionary way of thinking, even, you know, not cultural evolution, just thinking like a man's reproductive potential is going to be based on his ability to be goal-oriented, to pursue some type of social status so that he can get a mate to reproduce with. So it makes sense why then semen retention would benefit testosterone, goal orientation, you know, the willingness to butt up against difficult work, exerting yourself, because all those things are going to be necessary for you to attain some type of social status in which now you can spill your seed and afford yourself to, in a way, to be in a more vulnerable state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I agree with all that, and we'll talk about semen. Like, just thinking about that, I need to run the numbers on how many millions, but I think the stat we'll get to, you know, you make 1,500, like 1,500 sperm a second.
Wow.
Right. And so we'll get in kind of the sperm numbers. I threw that all in here to look at the decline and everything. Again, what's funny about this, though, is if you look at a lot of researchers, they're like, well, this didn't really prove it. Like, again, this is when you go to the conclusion, and the conclusions in the research papers will say things like, this was not statistically significant. They'll say that, or things like, well, I saw people say, well, this is debunked. The only reason their testosterone went up. I literally saw some scientist is like, well, this is debunked because the only reason their testosterone went up is because it was they were more excited. It wasn't because they were abstinent. I'm like, that's why they were more excited, because they were abstinent, you know? And this is what I'm talking about. Like, they have these science and they just don't. I'm like, how are you extrapolating this? You know, I'm just like, that's the whole point of it.
Right. Well, the inability to see it systematically and as a whole system, right? I mean, the medical field itself is so compartmentalized, and that they don't, you know, if you're not an internal medicine doctor or some type of general physician or a naturopathic doctor, you're not really even thinking in regards to systems, bodily biological systems. And so it's funny, again, as we move from 2020, we move further, it's like those who are pursuing truth, it becomes more obvious, and that it's like the same people criticizing, you know, No Nut November, semen retention. Go look at their Twitter. You know, Pfizer, you know, promoted the stabby, getting the jibby jab. You know, it's just so obvious. It's archetypal at this point.
Yeah, post physique.
Yeah, post physique pic.
What do you think, huh? What do you think? So this is one popular study, and then the other study. Same kind of. So this one was a little bit different. So they took 28 guys, their ages 21 to 45, and they separated them into, I think there was 16 and 12. And what basically they saw was that there was a bump. So if you can you see my cursor?
Yeah.
Okay, right. So we start off here with a median testosterone, right? And this is milligrams per deciliter, about, let's just say 380 of these 28-year-old guys. And you see it's kind of just scrolling around here. And then you see really about day 5, day 6. I mean, that's a substantial increase. By day 6, you're almost 450, right? So that's a 20% increase in testosterone. And then by the 7th day of abstinence, you see it jump up to be in the mid 500s, which is 150% increase, right? 50%. The thing is, and so they took these two groups, and then they had 16 that were abstinent, and this is what they showed. And they had a control group that didn't move. And then they took those 16 and they split them into two groups over here. The one group continued to abstain. That's this one. Their testosterone level did not move. The other group ejaculated. And then they showed 7 days later they had another peak. So we haven't figured this out too. I'm not 100% convinced that men don't have some form of longer cycle like a woman. It would make sense. Like, to me, 7 days is kind of weird. But like, imagine if a woman's ovulating on day 14, that there would be a 5 to 10 day window where men's testosterone jumps. Oh, does that make? And I see what you're saying. I'm speculating. I don't have any research to back this up. But it's crazy. And when you think about this, because a woman basically 14, like a woman's cycle is usually 28 days. So if you think about this, a man is spiking, it seems like every 7 days, and then a woman ovulates every 28, which is, again, kind of weird that you know what I'm saying? Yeah. You could get 4 testosterone spikes within that. And most likely, maybe it kind of would lay over that the guy's 7th day of abstinence might lay right into that
Right.
And you get over a long year, like if you're trying to conceive, that eventually those days would hit, that a guy's peaking his testosterone will peak. And, testosterone is governed, I think, any question about that?
Oh, well, I was going to ask leading into it. Sounds like you're getting ready to go into. I was curious with the direct correlation between fertility and testosterone.
Yes, I think I have that on my next. That's semen. I might go down a couple and then I'll come back just so you guys kind of. So we'll come down to semen stats. So your brain, your hypothalamus is the main thing people think about. Like it's the center, the center of the brain, right above the medulla, and it talks to a smaller place in your brain called your pituitary. Your hypothalamus releases gonadotropins, specifically luteinizing hormone, follicular stimulating hormone. That's these two guys here, right? Mm-hmm. LH, that goes down to your testes. You have what are called Leydig cells in your testes, and you have Sertoli cells in your testes. Your Leydig cells are important for producing testosterone, and your Sertoli cells are important for producing sperm.
Oh, interesting.
So this feedback loop all work together. So when you're producing more testosterone, you're almost always going to be producing more sperm. Now, one of the issues becomes though, like spermatogenesis is again not very well researched as far as time period, and I can give pretty good data on this because I have guys on TRT, which makes them completely infertile. So right, if you're ever interested in doing TRT will make you infertile. But what you can do is you can run HCG, which is an LH and FSH agonist, so I can see, and it takes about 70 to 90 days for that to come back on. So the whole process of creating sperm, like you're saying, it takes 60 to 90 days. And I hate to I don't know if this is a bad example, but like you would think about a cow and how much water it requires to turn itself into a pound of meat is kind of what I thought about when you said blood. It's like, dude, it takes you 60 to 90 days to create sperm.
Yeah.
Start to finish, probably closer to 70. So it makes sense that this whole process, right, is very energy taxing, really, at the end. So we can talk quickly. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about semen stats.
Yeah.
So those are the only really two testosterone things. But again, as an naturopathic doctor, I would extrapolate, then most likely your fertility is going to be better on these days, just telling you what I told you.
Right.
If testosterone's peaking, you're going to get pulsations of more testosterone, more spermatogenesis. Again, I'm extrapolating data. I don't have a peer-reviewed study to prove that. And I think one of these studies may have been redacted. To be honest, I don't remember which one. Where again, people argue in science like this isn't a good paper; it needs to be removed. So, but the study was still done.
Well, isn't it interesting that there isn't a lot of research into this stuff? Why isn't there?
You'd think,
I speculate that there has been. It's just not in the public domain. That I guarantee those in the know have already funded research regarding a lot of this stuff to figure out what's going on and why, again, some of the agendas that they push, why they're pushing is because they have data to back it up on what they're trying to do. And really, again, you look, and then the infertility, it's not just women. Like men are becoming more infertile. We want to yell at women and how their birth control and how infertile they are. Dude, men are becoming infertile.
Check it. Semen stats, 50% decline from 1970 to 2010.
Wow.
That's basically per 100 million per ml. A man ejaculates usually 2 to 5 ml. So you can understand. Yeah.
That is a ton.
And then you look at the ml concentration has gone down too. So this is actually more like a 75% reduction. So the amount per ml has been cut in half, and then the amount actually ejaculating has been cut in half. And this is what I was talking about. People are like, kind of get on me for being an naturopathic doctor. And I use a lot of, I use enclomiphene. I use HCG. Why? Because you grew up swimming in a Monsanto pond that had atrazine in it. You've heard Alex Jones, I don't like them putting chemicals in the water, turning the frogs gay.
Yeah.
It's like, he's talking about atrazine. Atrazine permits spermagenesis. Monsanto Roundup Ready is Monsanto Roundup Ready. Leydig cell toxic. You grew up on GMOs, you grew up anywhere around that, you had your Leydig cells killed by Monsanto, by those Roundup Readies. You probably have less Leydig cells than your grandpa. So yes, I use HCG with young guys because they're producing half as much testosterone. I don't have the testosterone data here, but I know it. 1988, the average 65-year-old male's testosterone was in the 500s. By the year 2000, that was down in the 300s. I see most guys coming to me with the total testosterone in the 300s. My testosterone at 23 was in the 300s.
Wow.
And I did, I'm sleeping, I'm eating, I'm doing everything right. And I tried for 7 years doing all the natural stuff. Right. So if you want to talk about I've been in trenches and I put hundreds of guys on TRT. And again, you can think what you want about that, and I'm not here to shill that. But at the end of the day, it's like, dude, we're in a sorry, pardon my French, we're in a war right now against testosterone, and they are nuking it. And you are being controlled by porn. You're being controlled by the endocrine disruptors. They're in your water.
Yeah.
Literally, we're recycling. Girls are on estrogen. They're pissing it in the water. I just showed you that feedback loop, right? FSH, LH. Do you know what? If you have high amounts of estrogen, it shuts down your testosterone production.
Oof.
This is the whole thing. People think, okay, soy. How does soy decrease testosterone? Soy is a xenoestrogen, meaning it mimics estrogen. So when your blood is measuring its blood, right? And your brain is looking at it, concentration of estrogen and testosterone. And higher estrogen will shut down this signal. So when you eat soy, your brain goes, wow, I have a lot of androgens. Let's shut down these signals. So not only does soy bind to the areola cells in your nipples and give you gynecomastia, it's also telling your brain you have plenty of androgens. So it shuts down your FSH and your LH. And that's just soy. I mean, black beans do it. There's like all kinds of xenoestrogens everywhere. You want to talk about parabens? You want to talk about phthalates? You want to talk about, again, the main thing is there's a book. I'm trying to think if I have it around here. It's called Estrogeneration. What's his name? Jay. I talked about it on Alice's podcast. Jay something. Dude, he goes through the top 10 and just shows you like, dude, this stuff is everywhere. Your testosterone is being nuked right now. I'm actually at the point where I'm like, most young guys should be on, I think, what's called the selective estrogen receptor modulator. And I'm all for Christ. I'm all for, like, I don't want to use these things. But when I have guys come to me and they're absolutely depressed, they have no motivation, they have erectile dysfunction at 23 years old, and I see their estrogen, and like, the thing is, you can't measure the xenoestrogens, you measure the estrogen. So you go, well, his estrogen's normal. It's like, yeah, but he's eating the soy, the atrazine, all those other things we can't measure.
Right.
And so those are what are lowering these guys' testosterone at the end of the day, and they're making them infertile. Like, look, the proof is in the pudding, guys. Testosterone levels crushed, semen levels crushed. And it's like, is this just from, and again, people come to me and they're like, how do I optimize semen? How do I optimize testosterone? Move to the country, throw out your TV, say your prayers several times a day. Don't be in traffic. And this is the other thing is like, I don't know. What do I tell? I'm living in Southern California. It's in the freaking air out here, Right. No, that's my rant. Sorry, man. I get like, cause I have guys come to me and like, what do I do? And we try and do natural things.
It's a really important rant. That was great. And it hammers the point too, that these guys need to be aware that your endocrine system doesn't just come back, right? It's not like other aspects of your biological systems that, you can do one thing and then, I'll just stop doing that and maybe it'll come a little bit. But as you're talking about that decrease in testosterone amongst men, generationally speaking, I mean, it doesn't matter. You can do all the right things now. It doesn't matter. You're not going to have 800, 900 natural testosterone level. It's not your fault. It's that the body itself isn't producing it because we've been inundated with this stuff. So when we talk about TRT or something, again, I am not on TRT. You are on TRT. You're a TRT doctor. This is going to be a necessity at some point. And again, everything is a trade-off.
Fertility
here
now, right?
Because it's also going to atrophy your testicles and your natural endocrine system, the endogenous hormones, because you're going to have exogenous. So everything is going to be a call here. You got to. This isn't a joke. If you're a man, this is not a joke. That's why you got so. Seriously, this is not an effing joke, dude. You got to get this stuff in order.
Other thing to think about. All of us were in our grandmother's womb. Okay, so when you were an egg inside of your mother, all the eggs that a woman produces, okay, are in her body at the time of birth. So meaning when you were an egg in your mother, you were in, and she was in her grandma, you were in her grandma. So these things go back generational, right? You want to talk about highest indication of male's testosterone level is the amount of androgens that he was exposed to in his mother's womb.
Oh,
so what was your mom doing? Like me, I was formula fed, right? So you want to go out like, why? Okay, Dr. Mo, why are my testosterone levels so low? Well, I grew up swimming in Monsanto farms. I grew up on a farm that was probably covered in atrazine. I ate crap food from 3 to 16. Right. I was soy formula fed. I had head injuries. I played football, right? And then I poisoned myself for 6 years. From 18 to 22, I was drinking 30 beers a week.
Right.
You don't think I crushed my Leydig cells? You don't think I crushed my pituitary gland?
Right.
And again, we don't have to get into too much about TRT. Like I had to go down this. I had to heal myself. I take ACG to keep me fertile. I'm still fertile. So there's ways to kind of deal with all this stuff. And I'm not around the chat, so I don't know if I'm getting too controversial.
No, you're good, man. I think somebody said, were you talking about Jay Campbell?
I know Jay.
Well, they asked if that was the Jay that you were talking about, because you said
it wasn't Jay. Jay Campbell wrote the TOT book. It's Jay. I have it. Esther J. No, Anthony J. Give me
Anthony J. Okay, it's all good. It's not that big a deal. People thought you were talking about Jay Campbell, and I knew that you're friends with him. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I'll just pull it up real quick. I have it. I'm pretty sure. There's a place in this. This is a great book. Like, I think every guy should read, because this is what I'm talking about. Like,
what is it? Put that up there again, then, for everybody to see.
And then right
we can't see it because the screens are so small. You need to unshare, so then your camera becomes bigger. Or post. There you go. Oh, estrogeneration. Oh, Estrogeneration by Anthony J. Okay, let me put that in Amazon.
And then he just breaks it down. He's like, "Look, dudes, you're in a spirit." This is what I'm saying. Like, you're being nuked. These are the 10 biggest estrogen disruptors. Like, they are everywhere.
Yeah.
And we don't know about stabbies. We don't know about antibiotic use in kids. Like, dude, we've been inundated with this garbage. We are a science experiment at this point. And at some point, like, you want to talk about fertility, you want to talk about hormone optimization. And this is me. This is when guys come to me. I have young guys come to me, right? And they want to do TRT and their testosterone's 200 and they're depressed. Right. Suicidal. I've had guys suicidal come to me like, Dr. Mo, no one will help me. I went to look for thyroid. Doctors won't help me. What do I do? I'm like, this may be your last pitch, right? I go to my doctor and they give me antidepressant.
Oh, that's not going to help any. It's going to make it worse.
No, it's sorry. Rant. That's my rant on that. But obviously that's one of my areas I'm most passionate about, because I see it, man. I've seen young guys. I see low T. I see infertility. I'm like, guys, and no one's talking about it. Like, look at these numbers.
Right. And then that's what is. I love the passion you have, because that's what the point of this stream is, trying to get to this point across to men, that this is not a joke. Working out is not an option. Eating clean is not an option. Semen retention. You have to take care of all this stuff just to get back to a potential baseline that was prominent 40 years ago. I mean, that's just getting out of that's just average testosterone from a man 40 years ago. You got to do all this stuff just to be there. And so this is not a joke. This is not something
you got to be on. And this is what I'm saying is, like, we don't have the luxury that our grandpa, like, they went to bed when the lights went, when the sun was down, they went to bed.
Right.
You know, I like whether or not, Paul Saladino's pretty controversial in the carnivore diet, but he does, right? How is his testosterone high? He lives in Costa Rica. He wakes every morning and does an ice bath. He goes surfing for 3 hours and lives off social media and eats grass-fed steak.
Yeah.
Like, if you can do that, then you're
gonna build it up a little bit. But even if he lived 50 years ago and did all that stuff, his testosterone would be even higher. That's the point we're trying to make, is that all of our Orthodox brothers here, as I talked about with Rachel and also last night with Posh, is we as Orthodox Christians do not believe that we're going to turn the world around. It's only going to get worse from this point forward. There is no turning around. There may be brief points where it's not as bad, but this is only going to progress, this entire agenda, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, 500 years. So what we're trying to do is not change the world or turn the direction of the world. We are trying to get those who want to follow Christ to the lifeboats. The Titanic is sinking. We're trying to tell people where the lifeboats are, that, hey, you got to do this. And so if we're Orthodox men and you're not going to be a monastic, then you're going to be a married man, and therefore you need to be able to be fertile to have children. And that's going to be tied to all these different... So I feel like taking care of yourself as a man has to be tied with your Orthodox spirituality, because that's the only way, unless you're a monk, and then you're even going to be in a much cleaner environment than if you lived in a monastery, but we don't. So you got to become so conscientious of this stuff, focus on it, work on it, because your partner, I mean, don't you want your wife to not be on birth control? Don't you want your wife to be as fertile as possible? Don't you want your wife not addicted to pornography? Well, then you got to do the same damn thing.
Yep. Yeah, we got to take responsibility on both ends. And again, on my end, there, like, every guy's an individual too. That's the other thing, is, like, you want to talk about head injuries, like a lot of military guys. You want to talk about depression, low testosterone, head injuries. When I talk about that pituitary, When you have head injuries, you can mess up your hypogonadal axis very easy. Dude, you want to talk about football? I went around and I smashed helmets with every guy my senior year, like 4 games in a row. Like I had concussions. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And a lot of other guys go through these same things.
Same.
Right?
I mean, I played football from Bantam League through high school.
Yeah. I mean, we all know you have brain damage. But...
yeah.
So back off my rant. Sorry about that. But it's just, guys, it's like you've been harping this since the beginning. This is spiritual war. They want you weak. They want you destroyed. They want your testosterone low. Dude, we're heading for infertility.
Yeah, like, we're literally heading where the majority of men can't even have a baby with a fertile woman. This is not a joke, guys. This is not a damn joke.
How many women you hear that now? All of a sudden, like you didn't hear that 10 years ago. Oh, they've been trying for a year or two, right? And now you have to use all these artificial means of impregnatation, right? IVF and it's like we're going into a science experiment. And again, I don't mean to press my views on anyone. I try and do my best to discern what I think God would want. And really, at the end of the day, I'm just trying to take this data and help as many people as possible, you know, and I don't have all the answers. So I'm not here to say that my Ray is the 100% the right way. I'm just trying to follow God. But judging by your action, I just assume there's some drama in the chat.
No. It's all good. No, there's no drama. I was getting ready to tell people are asking questions, but if they have a question they need to ask, they need to send in a super chat so we can actually address it. I'm not going to go through, 10 different questions on a variety of different topics.
Yeah, and I'm happy to answer them at the end.
Yeah, we're going to. So if you have any questions for Dr. Mo, whether it be hormones, facts, procedures, just send in a super chat. It could be $1. We just have to have it organized. There's a time and a place for questions, and we can't just haphazardly hit a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, vasectomy, dude. I could rant on this stuff. This is all I talk about all day long, and I see guys, and I can see patterns working backwards. Like how did this happen? So, we kind of left off just talking about the benefits on semen retention and sperm. This data is really, again, I'd say all over the place. This is a systematic review where they looked at 20 different papers. Really, at the end of the day, I think you can extrapolate from the data that at a 5-day mark, you will be more fertile. I think that's pretty much really hard to argue with. Going past that, there is some arguments that there may be a decrease in motility in the sperm, and that there also may be some more differences in morphology, meaning like the DNA, the sperm could be not a good swimmer, or it could not be like have good DNA in it, is the best way to put it.
Right.
But there is definitely an increase in how much you're going to ejaculate as far as sperm volume and count. So even if there's a 10% decrease in motility, but you have a 50% increase in number, you're still net positive, looks like kind of the longer that you go. Again, this is not, I cannot sit here and put my arm on the Bible and say this is, truth. But I think the data, if I had to guess, I think that a 5-day abstinence, and you hear this, most even urologists and mainstream doctors will say, hey, if you're trying to conceive, you think she's going to ovulate, retain for about 2 to 3 days. That's pretty standard. So I'm just saying, I don't think that people might say, oh, it's really bad on your sperm to retain for forever or whatever. I'm like,
well, really and that's where I'm curious on just the experiments that you've shown me. There's such a small window. Again, just looking at the Jesse James West video, all he did was not ejaculate for a month, and he got a dramatic increase in overall test levels at the end of the month. So I was thinking of that study where it showed the seven-day spike. Well, maybe something else happens after 21 days. Maybe the third week of the people, we don't know because people aren't doing these experiments with longer windows to see what does semen retention actually do to overall testosterone and men's health.
Yeah. And when we don't know, like when I think that study was like in the 70s or 80s, we don't know how, we have no idea how TV affects our testosterone. blue light, like the smallest things you've never thought about. When you sit in traffic and people are pressing their brake pads, those are floating in the air. And if you're sitting in traffic and you do that an hour a day for 10 years, you don't think you have like brake pad particles that are lodged in your body, in your lungs? Like your body has to detoxify the heavy metals. Right. Heavy metal, like you want to talk about what crushes sperm? A lot, heavy metal toxicity for sure. Right. Well, and you want to talk about drinking out of aluminum can. Like,
that's what I was going to say. You're the big one that got me off any sort of aluminum, like in my deodorant products. Like I spend extra money now to make sure that I get deodorant that has none of that garbage in it.
Yeah.
and that's where you kind of red pilled me on metal toxification, and it's like, oh crap, I thought that was so
aluminum,
well, thank you for that.
breast
Again,
cancer.
I've been aluminum free for a while now.
There you go. Yeah, mercury fillings. I've had mercury fillings. Like I literally could just go on the clothes. There are studies. They think that I didn't put this in there. Tighter underwear, right? We do get into that. Tighter underwear affects your semen production.
I've heard that. Yeah. Can you speak? I'm not familiar with the science on that, but I have heard that like tighty whities, like boxer briefs or boxers were better than tighty whities.
Yeah. So when you think about your testes, they're one of the only organs that are partially outside of your body.
Yeah.
And they're regulated. So one of the worst things you can do from your sperm is actually sauna.
Sauna.
At the end of the day.
Really?
They're too hot. Your balls get too hot and you basically kill the sperm.
Wow. That's interesting. I did not know that.
And so the idea is if you're sitting in tighty whities all day, you're forcing your testicles to be closer to your body. So you're more. And again, it'll probably decrease your sperm by 10%. But I had a friend, he sat in the sauna all the time and he was he was like a 5-6 day a week kind of guy. They were trying to get pregnant, couldn't figure it out. And then, went to the fertility specialist and he's like, what do you, this is things that don't get brought up in 5 or 10 minutes at most doctors. So luckily they figured it out.
Right.
And they're like, oh my, you're in sauna? Like how much? He's like, 45 minutes, 5 days a week. I listened to Rhonda Patrick and she said, and I like her. I'm not throwing shade, but all these things have risks and benefits.
Right. Everything is an exchange. Everything is an exchange.
And this isn't a testosterone stream, but you probably are icing the testicles. Some people, there's some evidence showing that increases testosterone. Basically, my theory behind that is if you're icing your testicles, you're shrinking the blood vessels, so there's a decrease in blood flow. And then when you un-ice them, you get a rush of blood. So you're actually getting more. That's, like you ever have an injury, you'll ice it to bring blood away. And then afterwards, the blood vasodilates and you get fresh new blood. That's why you ice things, right?
Okay. And
then you heat it to bring more new blood. And so there's theories on fertility. But then I think Kellogg, he had a big thing. If you guys, do you know much about Kellogg he was giving a bunch of people bread because he wanted to make them fertile because he was a Puritan and he was trying to.
No, I'm not familiar with this.
Oh, Lord.
Go ahead.
That's a J.
Dive in, bro. Here, let me just make sure that the audio is reset so we don't get any scratch. Okay. Yeah, dive in.
Yeah, that's a conspiracy Dyer thing. Kellogg, he was part of the food guide pyramid and the blah, blah, blah. And, Kellogg cereal. And I believe he was some form of Puritan, and they were purposely his theory was something like purposely giving people lots of grains and stuff to make them infertile. And then I think they were having them ice their testicles or whatever long enough to, again, make them infertile or something. Someone can Google that in the chat. They probably know about Kellogg. It was a big conspiracy. But Kellogg cereal,
wow.
Guy was a weirdo, that's for sure. So, yeah, the underwear thing is, so if you're wearing tighty whities or any type of I forget what the name of the word is. And I at the gym. I wear boxers all day. I go to the gym, try and keep my boys in place there. But if you're wearing that all the time, that heat, right? We'll learn about sperm here in a little bit, like how long it can live and all that. But
right.
That's you gotta protect your swimmer. And all it takes is one, really, at the end of the day, but better to have 100 million than
yeah,
6.
I'd rather have a whole army than just one good general.
Yeah. So here it is, just semen stats, right? 1940. You were getting about 113 million sperm per ml of semen. And then you can see 1990.
Gosh, 113 to 47.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Right. And the volume, like I said, the volume too has decreased. So, and I think now I wanted to double check on this in this paper, which was old, right? So I found a paper that had a 1940 to 1990. And then I found a paper that showed 2010. So I'd extrapolate data from different papers. And then I think normal sperm count might even be as low as 10 now. You get like they're lowering this testosterone sperm counts, they're lowering the normal ranges constantly.
Right.
Where 1940 a guy would have 113 million. Now if you have 20, it's considered normal. That's like 85% less.
Right.
Than 70 years ago. 80 years ago? We're 2020. So we talked about that. Again, kind of just a real brief overview. I talked about how it's produced. These are meds. If you're a guy, I don't do a whole lot of fertility, but you can go talk to your doctor about these things. Clomid and clomiphene, ACG. These things increase fertility. They also do increase testosterone. And again, you want to know something funny? Clomid, FDA approved drug. This summer, they voted on enclomiphene, which is half of Clomid. So Clomid has 2 isomers to it. Enclomiphene, in my opinion, I've used this a lot. This is a selective estrogen receptor modulator. So it tricks the brain into thinking I don't have much estrogen. So you produce, and I know it sounds counterintuitive, more testosterone. And guys do not get estrogen side effects. And if anything, it takes away estrogen side effects and takes away gynecomastia.
Wow.
That's anecdotally, it's weird.
So it's that sounds like the best option I've ever heard for boosting testosterone.
This is my first step into TRT, was using both Clomid and Enclomiphene. I've used it in fertility on guys, and then I used Enclomiphene. If you're a young guy and you don't want to do TRT because TRT will shut off your own endogenous production, again, I'm on it. I'm not concerned about it. I'm fertile. I know how to deal with that,
right.
But not everyone does. So don't be stupid. Do not be stupid. I'm not. This is not me encouraging.
Tell him, doctor.
Yeah, don't do it. Don't unless you know what the heck you're doing. It took me like 8 years of research to finally, and I had practiced on hundreds of guys before I was like. And again, I don't know how long I'm going to stay on, but I had symptoms. Like this is the thing is with TRTs. Like you don't do it if you don't need it. I'm not here to tell everyone out there to get on TRT or Enclomiphene or HCG or any of these things. If you're fine, you got good energy, libido's great, you're not like, then don't do it. But when you're like depressed, you have ED, you can't get out of bed in the morning, you don't want to do anything with your life, I would much rather you try one of these than do an antidepressant, because that's what your primary care is. You're going to do your primary care. They're going to measure your testosterone. It's going to be like 300, where the range used to be 350 to 1200. Now it's 250 to 800. And they're going to be like, oh, you're fine. You're a 24-year-old. Here is, here's some bupropion. Here is, this antidepressant. Like, hell no, do not do that.
Right.
And there are a lot of these things that help with fertility will help with testosterone. So I love Enclomiphene, using it on young guys. I see it, dude, their testosterone goes from 300 to 1,000. It can get the job done.
Wow.
Makes them extremely fertile. Very little to any side effects.
And Enclomiphene is FDA approved?
Okay, so the drug Clomid was originally designed, and this is all drugs. Cialis was originally a drug for heart disease, and they found it gave guys better erections. Clomid was originally made to help women ovulate. Remember I talked about estrogen?
Yeah.
In the first half of the cycle, and that it boosts and that helps them ovulate. So women were taking this, and then, again, bodybuilders, well, that's weird. If I take that, like this is peptides, this is a lot of things.
Right.
Like, I wonder what that's going to do. Then they noticed that it increased testosterone. Now, Clomid has two isomers to it. One is called zooclomiphene.
Okay.
One is called enclomiphene. Zooclomiphene is way more estrogenic. So we found that if you isolate out enclomiphene, it has a 10-hour half-life. So it means it's out of your blood in a day. It increases your own endogenous production. Your body produces more testosterone and increases your fertility and sperm output. It has a 10-hour half-life, and it's about, I think, 60% of that, 38% of the drug, if my memory is correct. Zooclomiphene is more estrogenic. It has a 30-day half-life. So you'll go online and you'll hear these, like a lot of bodybuilders will use it for PCT, post-cycle therapy. Yeah. Steve Cook did a video on it. He took Clomid, and it makes guys feel terrible because of that high estrogen side effects. So in my experience using this on, I don't know, hundreds of guys, I love, and Enclomiphene's great. It's a great, safe, but the FDA, basically what the FDA does is, Clomid is an FDA-approved drug made by, I don't know if it's Pfizer or whoever. And this isomer, a compounder can isolate for me. So I go to a compounding pharmacy and I say, hey, can you make this for my patient? He's 24. Sure. They voted this summer, though, to not allow it on the safe list, meaning that it's in a gray area now. So basically they took that away. Okay. And I want you guys to hear me now. I just showed you what's going on with the fertility. Now I'm going to tell you they're taking away our fertility drugs. They're making you infertile. And now they're taking these drugs away that actually can help you. Enclomiphene, they took off the safe list. HCG, it was a drug, and they and this is what they do. They reclassified it from a drug to what's called a biologic. So compounding pharmacies can no longer make it.
What?
A biologic? Yes.
This happened last year. A biologic and a drug?
So HCG is the hormone in women that goes up when they are the corpus luteum. Once the egg is fertilized, women release HCG. Right. So that's it's a naturally occurring amino acid sequence within the body. So the FDA says, well, that's not a drug. That's this biologic thing. And that has to be regulated differently. So this happened with peptides, where they took away a lot of BPC 157, one of my favorite peptides. It's isolated out of your own gut lining. It's been shown to help with regeneration, serotonin, depression. FDA said, well, that's a biologic, so we can't make those anymore. We need way more studies done. Dude, they're snaking us. And I see it. I'm sitting on they're going to come for testosterone next. They're already nuking your levels, and soon they're going to take away TRT and not let anyone be on TRT.
Right. No, I believe that 100%.
It's coming. I've been at meetings where they're already saying they're going to take it away from the compounders first, and then they're going to make it illegal. So as a doctor, if you come to me and let's say you have acne, right? I can prescribe you anything that I want. I could give you an antidepressant, right? A guy comes to you with ED and they give him an antidepressant. That doesn't even make any sense. But as a doctor, I can write things off label. They will, my opinion is they're going to make it impossible to write things off label. They do not want doctors practicing medicine.
Right.
They want doctors following orders.
Right.
So when you come to me and you're depressed, I give you an antidepressant and you go back to your doctor and it's like, it didn't work. We'll try another one. Like you know what I'm saying? They can't think, well, let's see. Hey, have you been, what's your diet like? You know what the best predictor of not having depression is? You know what? Exercise. The number one antidepressant is exercise. For sure. You're depressed, go work out. The issue becomes if you have something like low testosterone, this is another thing. It's going to hurt people's feelings. They had a study of guys who had low testosterone. One group, they gave testosterone. The other group, they had to go work out. Guess which group put on muscle? The testosterone group. Same thing with thyroid. If your thyroid is low, that's your body's heat. If your thyroid is low, you will not lose weight. It does. I don't care how good you eat, how well you eat. If you have Hashimoto's disease, which is an autoimmune disease where your body attacks your thyroid, you will not lose weight. You need to get your hormones checked. And there's endocrine disruptors all over the place that increase Hashimoto's disease and all kinds of thyroid disorders. Thyroid is your body's heat. If you go out in the sun, if you're like, you can't withstand temperature fluctuation. Dude, I have this guy. I wish I could show you him. He changed so much, lost like 30 pounds just putting him on thyroid.
Wow.
I would, Patrick, I talked to him and be like, hey man, how's it going? And I'd be like, hey man, what's going on? And literally I put him on testosterone. The next time he's like, hey doc, I'm back. Oh, I feel so great. I have so much energy. I'm able to have sex again. I can do all these things. Like, I'm not here to shill stuff, but I'm like, dude, this stuff is so important and you're being attacked. Like the hardest part for me is like, we're all being attacked.
Well, I mean, you're somebody who's spent their adult life, looking into men's health, hormones. I mean, at one point you were into bodybuilding. And so now you're a doctor and your expertise is in hormones, specifically men's testosterone. And, you're realizing that this is a central node in all the problems ailing men right now. And it's ironically something that you can just get very little research on. Just like, again, the topic today on semen retention. Why is it so hard to find medical research that shows any sort of positive correlation? And yet, as you showed, all the studies that they're using to tell you this is bad, make sure you masturbate and spill your seed, are just all extrapolations of data that really doesn't even say that.
Mm-hmm. And that's where, again, you have to follow white rabbit, yellow brick road. I don't know what the Orthodox saying of that would be, but, follow Christ and you see the truth unfold, right? So, and I just threw some other tidbits on here that, a lot of things that are good for testosterone are good for your testes, right? A lot of stuff for your mitochondria, L-carnitine, NAD, LA, vitamin C and D. And then I said here, sauna, right, is bad for your testes.
Yeah.
Alcohol. And again, this is why you got to work with the doctor.
Speak a little to alcohol. You didn't get into that one.
Right, you're poisoning your testes. Think about it. When you drink alcohol, right? You drink alcohol, goes in your stomach, gets absorbed in your blood. You just poison yourself. That is literally what you're doing at the end of the day. And it's the backup of the alcohol dehydrogenase pathway that produces acetaldehyde that impairs your neurological function. And that's why you're in a daze and confused and you're inhibiting certain parts of your brain. It releases it's a GABA agonist, right? So when you think about neurotransmitter, like I use a car, dopamine is going to be the speed. Serotonin is going to be like the balance, like how smooth it feels.
Yeah, how it
acetylcholine.
handles.
Yeah. Acetylcholine is going to be like the driver and the ability to focus. And then GABA is going to be your brakes. Right. And so you can extrapolate on all those things. Imagine that you got a lot of speed, but your tires aren't aligned. So if you get a lot of dopamine, like you're on cocaine, you're just like all over the place. Right. You're on Molly, you're just super excited and relaxed. Right. Nicotine is acetylcholine. So thinking of cigarette, like super focused. And then alcohol is GABA. And so to me, a lot of this all has to do with the ratio of those at the end of the day, more than like you can drive 100 mile an hour if you're a good driver, you got good brakes and you got a good sense of direction.
Yeah. And your car handles well.
Yeah. And you can supplement those all with supplements. We've talked about that before, like, choline supplements. Tyrosine is the backbone to creating epinephrine. Tryptophan is the backbone for serotonin. So really at the end of the day, alcohol hits this GABA receptor and inhibits, right? That's why you get courage, because your prefrontal cortex gets slowly pulled back a little bit so you can go and do more things. But
I've noticed as I've taken the last 3 years, I've really taken, obviously everybody knows, fitness a lot more seriously. Been very consistent with that. The most consistent I've ever been in my life is the last 3 years. And I have noticed, because I'm not a huge drinker or anything, but I generally drink socially with friends and stuff like that. So we get together, that the days after I drink, it doesn't mean I got drunk or maybe just a small little buzz, but the dehydration, the weakness, when I go hit the gym again, the session just isn't there. The pump isn't there. It's just I'm off. I'm off whenever, and it could just be just a little bit of alcohol. And so that's been one of the things that's kind of pushed me, because I like inebriation. That's a temptation for me. And so trying to focus on my body and just like feeling phenomenal, like as much as I can in the most natural ways, that has pushed me to like not want to drink, especially in even social circumstances, just because I'm thinking about how I'm going to feel the next day. My session, is going to take like 2 or 3 days for me to recover. So I'm curious, like, how that's my phenomenological, my experience with it. I mean, that's consistent with what you understand in regards to its effect on hormones and the GABA system and all that.
Yeah. And, my bodybuilding, I did my first show at like 21, and I'm in state college, right? And I'm drinking 30 beers a week, pretty much. I'm going out 8 beers a night, 10 beers a night.
Everclear. And I was always a liquor guy. So it was always about the cheapest way to get the most drunk.
Yep. Ezra Brooks, bottom shelf whiskey. Jungle, dude.
Skull vodka.
Threw up my mouth a little bit. That and Caribou Loose. What I would do, bro. 151 run, pineapple juice, Malibu. But I remember I took a week off from drinking, and you're probably familiar when you're at state in college, and I went in Monday and had a good workout, because for me, it was always like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I had like 70 to 80% work. They were good, right? I'm young, I'm 21. But then Thursday, Friday, I'd feel good. And then I just ruin it. Friday. And then Monday, I was still a little bit hungover by Monday. Sunday, I was completely hungover and I laid in bed all day, right? Monday, I kind of got it back. And then one weekend I didn't drink. And I went in, I lifted on Monday and I was like, holy cow, I'm strong. Like, I feel good. And just like you, I'm like, this is not worth it. But again, what does the world tell you to do? Go to state school. Drink all your buddies Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. You're literally, okay, Halloween.
Yeah, how many people are recovering right now from last night?
Sugar, right? So dude, Halloween, we literally have our kids dress up as serial killers and demons, and then we have them run around a neighborhood and get poisoned by adults. That's all sugar. That's all that is. That's all, like, how crazy are we as a society?
I've never heard it worded that way, but yeah, I guess.
That's what it is. You're going to complete strangers and they're giving you poison. Like, dude, that Hershey's chocolate is poison. That is poison. You want to talk about nuking? And again, I can extrapolate semen analysis from testosterone that one of the biggest, I think it's something like 40 to 80 milligrams of sugar at once will drop your testosterone instantly by about 20%. And it's for like an hour. Wow. But that's still significant enough for me to be like, it's not worth it.
Right. Oh, I'm not there yet. I'm still working on it. I've done good with the alcohol. Definitely working on the masturbation, the pornography, cutting sugar out of my diet. Totally. I'm not there yet.
I got this cookie over here. It's gluten free. So what's also actually funny is another point to elaborate on is the idea of correlation versus causation. Mm-hmm. For instance, there are studies showing that men who smoke have higher testosterone. Is that correlation or causation? Meaning guys who have higher testosterone will probably smoke, because guys who have higher testosterone are more likely to take risks. But you can extrapolate from that data. You go, oh, well, let's look at everyone who smokes. Their testosterone's higher. It's like, again, I'm not pressuring people into smoking. I'm just like looking at the data and trying to extrapolate.
No, I've mentioned that before. I think I showed the article in one of my streams is that the most dangerous jobs, there's a study on testosterone in men, in that the most dangerous jobs that men do is like deep sea fishing and like high, building, towers and stuff like that, that they almost all had a nicotine fix. The majority smoked, but some would then chew. And so the article then was bringing into question, like, is it that the nicotine aids one's testosterone for these men that occupy these jobs? Or as you're pointing, is it the jobs necessitate a man with high testosterone and they're just way more likely to engage those? Is there a feedback loop there? It's hard to kind of pinpoint that, but I think it is really interesting that at least within the research of occupations, the most dangerous occupations are all men, and the vast majority, it was like 97% or something, had some type of nicotine fix or something that they would practice.
Yeah, and I would extrapolate all of what you said and the idea that so testosterone increases basically dopamine and epinephrine and serotonin sensitivity. So think about this, like there's a car and it's about to roll over a baby and you run over and pick it up real quick. Like, did you just get really, really strong in 60 seconds? No, I would argue most of strength is actually neurological, hormonal, and neurotransmitters. It's the flood of the dopamine from the neurologic, the cleft that tells the cells to be able to do something.
Right.
And so when guys have more optimal testosterone, they're going to be more sensitive to dopamine and serotonin. And I'm not sure. I would assume that extrapolates onto acetylcholine as well. But I would also argue that those guys probably need a little bit of acetylcholine because nicotine for focus. Does that make sense? Like they have all this testosterone. Acetylcholine helps you bring it in, right? Like you see a guy, I got to chill out. I got to smoke a cigarette.
Yeah.
It helps you, you get anxious. It helps you bring things in. So I don't mind. And again, nicotine is another one. It's like risk versus reward. I don't know. Are you writing a paper tonight? Can you do 5 milligrams of it in a gummy? And is it going to like kill you? I don't think so. But you'd have to extrapolate what are the risks versus the benefits and all those. So
and how much alcohol affects your system? I mean, just one glass of wine is going to have a detrimental effect. It's about what alcohol turns into and its effect on your endocrine system. It's not, I'll just have a little alcohol. I mean, it's what alcohol turns into, and that's just the exchange you're going to make. Because there are positive benefits of red wine and XYZ.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, again, people press that. You get some polyphenols, some antioxidants. I think if I had to pick, I'd say the social setting is more important. Like it allows you to relax and the GABA. And
that's really the only time I drink is with other people drinking.
And I'm the same way. I do 1 or 2 cocktails a week, maybe some bubbly, some Moscow Mule.
Yeah.
I think again, I'm doing 40,000 foot views here, right? You're probably familiar with the 80-20 principle.
Yeah.
And so like if you ask me, how much do I have to work out to build muscle? You're probably familiar, 4 Hour Body. Tim Ferriss showed you can build muscle in 4 hours a month. You can do, have you read that book? You know that one?
No.
4 Hour Body by Tim Ferriss. Oh, that was one of my first things that got me into it. Tim Ferriss. He basically showed that he worked out 20 minutes twice a week a month and put on like 15 pounds of muscle over 3 to 4 months. And what he did was he would do a warm-up set of everything and then just do a max rep to 15 of everything. And that's all he did. But in that book, he breaks down the 80-20 principle, right? Like you list like 80% you eat your diet, 20% of your diet, 80% of the time, right? So of all the foods, your clothes, of all your clothes, you wear 20% of your clothes, 80% of the time.
Right.
And so same thing with muscle mass. Like you honestly do not have to do a whole lot to get a benefit.
Right.
That makes sense. But then you get how we can probably extrapolate that to alcohol. Like probably a couple of drinks isn't going to be the best for you. More is going to be worse, but a little bit can still, like, dude, 2 glasses can leave you hungover, at least for me.
Well, maybe it can affect my sleep. I'm a very sensitive sleeper, so I noticed that. But, Mike Metzger, the famous bodybuilder in the 70s, once he got out of bodybuilding, was the big promoter of like the one set max.
Yep.
And, of course, I've heard Franco Columbu and other bodybuilders say, well, when he was competing, he was in there just as long as the rest of us doing multiple sets. But, for me, too, I just enjoy being in the gym. So, my goal isn't necessarily the most efficient thing in the world. I enjoy working out. It's a sort of moving meditation for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, really, at the end of the day, the takeaway I'd like to tell people is like 20 minutes twice a week.
That would be plenty. It depends on. It just depends on who you are. That's why I try to hammer the whole fitness thing. It's not about being a bodybuilder, or it's just about doing something physical regularly, consistently in your life, 3 times a week at least, and doing something that you enjoy doing. You don't want your workout to be something you hate, or you're not going to be consistent with it. I just happen to like this. You also are, you like to bodybuild, and do that type of stuff. If you're into that, do that. If you're not into that, if you're into long distance running, you can do that. Like, do whatever. You just got to do something. You got to stress your body. You have to stress it and keep it in optimal shape so that your endocrine system doesn't go to pot, and you're that guy with a soft dick who can't even pleasure his wife, can't do anything sexually.
Yep. Yeah. And that's all, when you work out, you're releasing nitric oxide, which vasodilates your blood vessels, and because your blood feeds nutrients to your muscles. You don't think that nitric oxide keeps the blood vessels in your penis open too? So you want to talk about erectile dysfunction and aging and all that? Like, exercise, really, at the end of the day. So, other just fun facts here. I just, again, how much, sperm you produce a second. Little things people don't really know that I thought would be interesting. It takes about 5 minutes to 60 minutes after you have sex for the sperm to reach the egg. Sperm is alive outside of the body. It usually dies within 30 minutes when it's dried. Let's see. Sperm can live for 5 to 7 days inside of a woman.
Whoa, I did not know that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's probably shorter to 2, like that's really stretched. Most people would probably say 2 or 3, but I found some research showing 5 to 7.
Wow.
Ovulation is usually about, a 2 to 3 day window with maybe a max of 6, right? So if you're really trying to conceive, just some small little facts I thought I'd add in there. Now we get into masturbation versus sex. I kind of already talked a little bit about this, that a lot of the research people extrapolate the benefits of orgasm, right? Because you orgasm, you get dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, prolactin, all these things. But you go into some of these articles, they're just kind of hitting on like, basically, this article got attacked so much by the pro masturbators about the frustration they had with his article, basically saying that penile vaginal intercourse is the best form of sexual experiences, sexual activities. It shows here, condoms make it worse. Anal intercourse, all those things have inverse association with health, really, at the end of the day,
right? Compared
to regular sex,
right? Which is exactly what you would think if God created us and there's a particular order. Again, and when you do it the wrong way, it leads to deaths and leads to death. That all makes sense.
Yep. Yeah. And again, I'm just throwing some science, right? Prolactin, 400% increase when you have sex with a partner versus masturbating. You're right. That's that bonding hormone that can help you feel relaxed. One of the things with you're talking about is that high amount of prolactin probably brings more satiety, right? Okay. So you have sex a couple times a week versus like, I got a small prolactin kick. You're not full, right? So you got to be doing it. Like if sex is 4 times greater, then you probably have to masturbate 4 times. Like,
right.
Yeah, I'm extrapolating.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
That's not what the data.
And that would then lead into people being more addictive in the processes because they have to, do more of it just to get the same experience of an actual sexual intercourse with a partner.
Yeah. Yep. And then, they had another small study I thought was interesting. They were talking about benefits. And they did show that more specifically males, and again, I'd have to kind of look at the details of the study, but after having sex, they slept better, right? Quality of sleep was improved. They didn't compare it to, they may have compared it to orgasm, if I remember right. And it seemed like the only time that the more that it improved sleep was when specifically males, specifically with a partner.
Now, I don't mean to jump ahead or anything, but do you mention in the PowerPoint anything about semen retention and pheromones, hormones, and women's response to, or is there anything about that? Because people say that women can really tell a man that's has a sack full of semen.
Yeah. I personally have not found anything. Okay. I've heard that. I've heard specifically some of the stuff like Peterson talks about women smelling men's shirt and they can tell the pheromones.
Well, I know that's a fact just from dating that some women like love the way you smell, like your natural scent. And that is, again, according to all research, like a bonding mechanism to show that the sort of genetics are compatible is that the woman can sort of smell your unadulterated scent and whether she likes it or not.
Yeah, there's something, and I'm not an expert on this. It's some type of antibody. I think it's called RH. And again, maybe someone in the comments knows more about this and can correct me. But there is a compatibility that's rare. That if a woman's like RH positive and the husband is negative, there's a chance that the baby can be negative. I'm messing this up, but it's something like this. The baby can be negative, and then the woman will autoimmune kind of attack the body. It's really rare, but again, I feel like I've heard that that's part of that idea, that the woman can smell that. Right. Again, I don't have data. I saw this. This is,
who knows? It would make in my worldview, that would make sense in regards to God's sort of sorting mechanism amongst men and women. That women would be able to sort of. I feel like there's got to be a preeminence on genetic compatibility in regard to these sex, especially back in the day when, well, I mean, anyways, I digress.
Yeah, no, I agree. And to what extent we can prove that with science, I think, like you're saying, for some reason we're not really researching that, right. Which you think, but then the science you and I've had this conversation when you want to talk about maybe different genetics not mixing well, right? And that doesn't go well with the multiculturalism idea, right? If you said, hey, let's look at these two cultures. I mean, I don't know. Again, I don't know how to say this and be completely non-PC and get us flagged, but I don't, I'm saying the more variety and difference that you have in partners, will that not complicate the production of the baby? Like, right. Like if you have an 8-foot tall guy and you have like a 4-foot tall girl, I don't know what that looks like, right? Is that baby going to be, and I'm extrapolating, people might think it's extreme weird. You get where I'm like, if there's a wide variation in the differences in the partners, what is that? And again, you get what I'm trying to say. Yeah. I'm trying to not.
No.
But do you get why that wouldn't be researched?
Right.
Is what I'm saying.
And also one of the things that they don't talk about is that oxytocin and prolactin, that ability for the woman to pair bond. And so the more partners she has, I've seen some studies that showed that, after 6 partners, basically there's no difference between a woman who slept with 7 people or with 20 people, that it's basically built a similar response where she doesn't build that same pair bonding with somebody that she has physical intercourse with. And so if we're also then men and we're trying to restrict ourselves and find the best wife, well, then that's also going to play a big factor in regards to finding partners that are actually going to be good pair bonds.
Yeah, I think I know what study you're talking about. And there's a couple of different things in that. And if I remember right, for the first, like, let's say 7 partners, men were slightly less able. And I think they tried to measure hormones and what they look like and satisfactory with the relationship. And I think it was like, maybe a 5% difference. That, to be transparent, for the first handful of partners, the men were more at the less ability to connect. And then there was a kind of jagged upreach where women after 6 or 7 partners, shot up to like a 15 to 20% flippage, if that makes sense, to the other way, where there's a lack. I don't know if it was a lack of prolactin or oxytocin, and I'd have to go back. I remember looking at that study a long time ago. Like it was like satisfaction with your relationship or something. Yeah, and as sexual partners increased,
more
both
dissatisfaction, and which ties into then all the whole manosphere talking about female rates of divorce. 80% of the time, at least within the American landscape, contemporary American landscape, all divorces are initiated by women. And that would make sense then, that this promiscuity culture is actually creating, it's affecting people to a degree that they literally cannot pair bond for long term, because it gets back to then self-pleasure. Right. Yep. And so the restraining, that's where it comes back to, the restraining, of not cooming all the time is a self-restriction that's going to allow you to bond better with somebody else.
Yeah. And let's throw some mercy over. And I know you're like, let's throw some mercy at the women. Like more than they are. You want to talk about all the things I complain about? They are getting nuked.
Yes, they are too.
Completely nuked with endocrine disruptors. You want to talk about them putting on makeup every day, all the stuff they're using in the shower, the perfume. All of that is endocrine disruptors. So you want to talk about why we have such high rates of PCOS. We have anxiety, depression in these women. Their hormones are all goofed at 15. They're waking up and they're dousing themselves in endocrine disruptor before they go to school to be indoctrinated about climate change and, all this other BS. So obviously, like, they're going to have a hard time with pretty much everything. Like, that's why I would argue that, for instance, you see in women what's called estrogen dominance. And with men, we need a testosterone to estrogen ratio. If your testosterone's too high and your estrogen's too low, you're going to be very numb. You're going to be very warrior-like and very not caring, right? Your estrogen goes too high, you're going to see a dead bunny on the side of the road and start crying. Okay. And I think it needs to be something like you're watching Lord of the Rings, Gandalf comes over the hills and you tear up a little bit. right? You're watching The Chosen, Mary Magdalene, cry like, oh, okay, I think it's all right for a guy to show a little bit of emotion.
Right.
And so what women happens to them is they get stuck in this estrogen dominance where they have a lot of estrogen, and then it messes up their whole ovulation, right? Because I said you have to have estrogen go up, ovulation, second half, you estrogen, progesterone. And what happens is these hormones are detoxed out of the liver. And so let's say that you can clear 100 chemicals a day, right? And that is also paired with estrogen, right? So you can clear, and you produce 50 estrogens a day, no big deal. But if you have 50 estrogens and then you have 75 alcohols, now you're building up these hormones, right? So that's one of the biggest thing. If you're a woman and you're trying to get your cycle figured out, is you need to detox as much as possible, because your liver can only do so much at such a speed, and it gets backed up like a pipe, if that makes sense. And then you're flooding, and this happens for guys, but not as much, because women's hormones are flying up and down, and they're getting bombarded with way more endocrine disruptors.
Wow.
So you want to talk about, them, they, again.
Well, maybe that'd be another stream in the future, just focusing on female health and endocrine disruptors and all that stuff. Because we were all being bombarded. That's why even women, we got multiple women listening right now. This information is beneficial for them when they're looking for a male partner.
Well, you talk fluoride in the water. This is what I'm saying. Like, we can go on all day.
I know.
It's everywhere.
Fluoride's there to clean your teeth.
Yeah, and it also is a highly electronegative molecule that displaces iodine and can lower your thyroid function. And dude, it's like, we don't have to get started on that. You want to talk about thyroid disorders, right? A lot of people have fixed their thyroid disorders by getting more iodine because it displaces. I mean, then again, these are kind of, I don't want to say fringe ideas, but the modern medical community doesn't really recognize them. You're probably familiar, but I don't buy that. You do not need fluoride to keep your teeth healthy. Like, why? And this is like, if it's controversial, just don't do it. Like, why? If you lured someone and someone said, hey, did you know that this could, mess with your thyroid? Like, what? Even if they're lying, like, who cares? Just don't do it. Like, be conservative with it. And it's like, chances are, most of the time, there's going to be a risk to almost anything. So, my 2 cents. And I think at this point, we talked a lot about the negatives already of masturbation, right? How dopamine wise, neurons that fire together, wire together, right? So we talked about like a basketball player, he'll do his 3 dribbles, shoot a shot, right? What happens when you take him and you move him, to the corner for a 3-pointer? He doesn't do 3 dribbles and a shot, but you get how his mind is like, imagine that he just shot free throws for 10 years, right? And then you took him and then you put him in the corner and he tried to shoot a free throw from there. It's completely different. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like the neuromechanics of, and like sex, like people don't think about this. When you're having sex, you're actually up and moving. Like if you're sitting there and you're masturbating, you're sitting in your chair and you're not like, shoulders aren't moving, your legs aren't moving. And so you hear this. A lot of women are like, why are men such terrible lovers? It's like, well, they practice, number one, on porn. And then number 2, they're just sitting in a chair.
Right.
So you want to get up, you're going to have erectile dysfunction because your brain's like, whoa, what is going on here?
Right.
At the end of the day, again, neurons that wire together, fire together. So all these processes are intrinsically connected at the end of the day. And then you're going to have a really hard time breaking that.
Right.
Right. I have guys, you've been doing this for 10 years. Now you're married. Now you're going to stop? Really?
Right. And as you point, and you didn't finish the word, but training to be a cuck. I mean, pornography. And again, I'm not here to degrade anybody. I'm as guilty as anybody else. But we're being trained to be cuckolds because we are pleasuring ourselves by watching other people have sex.
Yep.
And then we talk about, this cuck or that cuck, or people being cucked by culture or whatever it is. Well, if you're watching porn, you're being cucked because you're pleasuring yourself by the sexual interactions of other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how weird is that? Like, would you sit in someone's window and watch people if they let you? Like, the whole OnlyFans thing just blows my mind, right? The dudes, like, my associate doctor here had someone at his complex. He was talking about their friend, right? Oh, the pandemic hit and, they both lost their jobs. So she's on OnlyFans and she's making $100,000 a year. And like the husband takes the pictures and posts them. And I'm just like, he's a cuck. Like, honestly, at the end of the day, that's what that is. That's incredibly weak male behavior. One, my woman's body is mine. Nobody gets to see that but me. And if the pandemic hits and we're strapped for cash, I'm going to figure shit out. I'm going to figure something out. We're going to be all right. But you're not, no, that's the last thing that's going to be allowed. Yep. Yeah. And that's kind of he was like, well, I was trying to like talk to him, like, just pearls before swines at that point.
Yeah.
So yeah, obviously erectile dysfunction. Obviously, you're wiring your brain in the wrong direction. And you talked about that. Andrew Huberman's making the rounds, talking about how, you could probably get into more details about MRI scans and parts of the brain that are going to get more blood flow to others. I'm not an expert in those areas, but I think that's the meat and potatoes of that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And, what's funny though, is then again, people want to make these, oh, well, masturbation, it's a good stress reliever. It gives you these good neurotransmitters. It's like, that's, I'd have to think of what logical fallacy that is. Like smoking is a stress reliever. Drinking alcohol is a stress reliever. There's lots, taking a baseball bat and beating, like going, you ever seen those, what do they call them? Like the rooms people go in and just tear stuff up. And the same thing with the neurotransmitters. They're like, well, masturbating increases dopamine. I'm like, dude, so does meth and cocaine.
Yeah.
It's not an argument.
Well, if you're in San Francisco, they'll go ahead and give you needles. So they'll give you your porn or your needles, whichever you need for your dopamine release.
That's true. And I saw a real funny thing. Some people have you ever heard this death grip syndrome?
No.
This is the idea, and this is again controversial. I came upon it, searching through stuff. And it's the idea that guys just squeeze too hard. You're using your hand, like that's not a vagina. That's your hand. And like, if your hand's calloused, and again, this is, I'd say you'd have to really kind of go at this. But when you think about, again, your hand compared to a vagina, and if your hands are calloused and you're doing this, I remember, I don't know about you, but growing up, some kids being like, yeah, I'm pretty much raw. Because like when they first, I remember one of my friends being like, yeah, I did it 5 times last night. And I'm like, raw. I'm like, I don't think that's good, dude.
I don't think that's advised.
Yeah, but you get how he was addicted, and there are theories that your hands are like, you're just squeezing too hard. Are you impinging the nerves? You're desensitizing the nerves at the end of the day. Not a lot of research on it, but again, negative effects. I thought I'd at least bring it up. Like, it's probably not good. That's not how a vagina, like, you're not going to be, again, I don't know what people's techniques are, but, if you're not using lubrication and then you're just like strangling that guy, yeah, you could probably cause, pyronies. I don't know if you can say that comes from masturbate. Pyronies is when you get the bend in the penis. Maybe you've ever heard of that. You get a calcium deposit in the penis, and so when it fills up with blood, it's kind of like if you had a inflatable and there was tape on one side, causes a bend in the penis. It's called pyronies.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's any evidence to show. Like, again, I'm trying to steel man both sides. I don't know if masturbating causes death grip syndrome or pyronies.
I'm sure that there can be. I'm sure there's certainly instances of people altering the way in which they sense pleasure based on just the correspondence of the way that they masturbate or pleasure themselves.
Yeah. And so we don't have to get in all this. I literally just went to yourbrainonporn.com. It's a good resource. And it has, like, when you're talking about dopamine, MRI scans, kind of all, like, this is a really good resource of different literature. You can go there if you need to, scientifically back up a lot of the things that we talked about today. Mm-hmm. Again, over 80 studies, porn use and relationship satisfaction. Like, these are all things we kind of know, but if you want the science and the literature, and I dug through some of these and we talked about them today. Mm-hmm. But just to show, like, dude, the literature's out there. Porn's bad for you. Like, at this point, I don't know anyone that can defend porn. I've had some people that still.
Well, that urologist that you pointed, doesn't she have videos?
Yeah. Well, she's at least, this is I think